Chapter 4519. Challenge. Gu Ling Wuji's face darkened when he heard Fong Jin's words. He said cold, "Fong family's boy, what tricks are you trying to play now?" Previously, it was because of Fong Jin's intervention that Nie Tian had agreed to help everyone awaken their lifelines. Now, Fong Jin wanted to play the same trick again. He seemed to be intentionally making use of Nie Tian's straightforwardness and decisiveness. He relied on his prestige among the martial artists to speak to the Fengtian sect as the representative of all the martial artists. Now that he mentioned the word challenge, his motive was obviously not simple. Nie Tian had just burned a large amount of vitality and had only recovered 10 to 20% of his strength. How could he accept any more challenges? Just say it. Nie Tian frowned and said straightforwardly. He really wanted to know who was playing tricks behind Fong Jin's back. It's very simple. Fong Jin did not look at Gu Ling Wuji. His eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. He said, "Lord Beacon Emperor helped everyone awaken their lifelines, but a few people failed to awaken their lifelines. In order to make up for his mistake, Lord Beacon Emperor will accept challenges from the martial artists present. If a few people fail to awaken their lifelines, Lord Beacon Emperor will accept a few challenges. How about it?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Fong Jin's words. He did not expect Fong Jin to be so vicious at such a young age. According to Fong Jin, if 9 people failed to awaken their lifelines, Nie Tian would accept 9 challenges from everyone present. However, Nie Tian's body was currently very weak. His strength was less than 20% of his usual strength. How could he accept everyone's challenges? More importantly, Fong Jin said that the scope of the challengers was the people present. If those powerhouses on the viewing pavilion came forward to challenge him, how could Nie Tian fight? The powerhouses on the viewing pavilion were the higher-ups of a faction. Most of them were divine ancestor powerhouses. There were even existences close to peak divine ancestor powerhouses. Even if Nie Tian was at his peak, he could not fight a peak divine ancestor powerhouse. Fong Jin was not suggesting at all. He was trying to force Nie Tian to his death. As soon as Fong Jin finished speaking, it caused the crowd to start discussing animatedly. Isn't Fong Jin's suggestion a bit too much? Nie Tian's Beacon Emperor has expended too much of his life force just now. His strength is not even 1 or 2%. How can he accept the challenge now? What's wrong with that? I don't think Fong Jin's suggestion is bad. Nie Tian didn't let everyone awaken their lifelines in the first place. This is a challenge that he should accept. Yes, Nie Tian is the Beacon Emperor, the dignified leader of the Fengtian sect. With such a high position, he must be able to withstand the pressure that ordinary people find unbearable. Isn't this the responsibility that he has to bear? The crowd discussed among themselves, and many people actually agreed with Fong Jin's suggestion. At the end of the day, although Nie Tian had helped them awaken their lifelines, they were not members of the Fengtian sect. They did not identify with the Fengtian sect or Nie Tian, so they naturally did not care about Nie Tian's life or death. To them, watching a good show was more important than anything else. Many people in the observation pavilion were also discussing among themselves. However, most of them felt that Fong Jin's suggestion was not bad. These people originally had their own ulterior motives, and they naturally did not mind watching Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect make a fool of themselves. In a pavilion on the 8th floor, the Ghost Cliff's vice sect master, Yin Tong, stared at Fong Jin with a cold smirk. He thought to himself, this Fong Jin brat has been opposing the Heaven Feng sect for quite some time now. Looks like his goal isn't that simple. This kid doesn't seem to be that shrewd. Moreover, the Tianshu Fong family and the Fengtian sect do not have any grudges. It seems that someone is behind this. Yin Tong had suspected Fong Jin before, and now he was even more certain of his guess. Just now, he was still worried and did not know how to clean up the mess. He did not expect Fong Jin to come out of nowhere and help him a lot. Yin Tong had long noticed that he was not the only one who was hostile to Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect. He guessed that the person who was secretly instructing Fong Jin was most likely in one of the observation pavilions. At this moment, that person was probably staring coldly at Nie Tian. In the sky above the square, Niet Tian looked at Fong Jin and did not speak for a long time. If it was in the past, he would have already agreed to Fong Jin's suggestion. However, he knew the condition of his martial body, and this matter concerned the survival of the Feng Tian sect, so he had to be calm and cautious. Lord Beacon Emperor, have you made up your mind? Seeing that Niet Tian didn't speak for a long time, Fong Jin couldn't help but become even more arrogant and aggressive. Before Niet Tian could speak, Guling Wuji's face darkened. He took a step forward and said Fong Jin coldly, Fong Jin, you don't have to be so aggressive. Although Lord Beacon Emperor is the leader of the Feng Tian sect, he is still young. Moreover, he has just awakened everyone's life meridians and consumed a lot of his vitality. Do you want Lord Beacon Emperor to accept the challenge of the senior martial artists in his current state? Fong Jin looked at Guling Wuji as if he knew that the latter would say that, so he did not find it strange at all. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, Lord Beacon Emperor is young and talented. He should not be afraid of anyone's challenge. Is that so? Guling Wuji frowned, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He said directly, Why don't you let I accept the challenge on behalf of Lord Beacon Emperor? You? Fong Jin's eyebrows furrowed. He hadn't expected that Guling Wuji would actually dare to stand up for Niet Tian. Niet Tian's expression changed when he heard Guling Wuji's words. He was shocked. He knew that Guling Wuji was powerful, but his forte was formations and barriers. In a real battle, he could not be considered a top expert. Moreover, Guling Wuji was old and his vitality was waning. If the top experts from other forces were to challenge him, his life would be in danger. Niet Tian even felt that Guling Wuji might not be as powerful as him at his peak. Therefore, it was not a good idea to let Guling Wuji accept the challenge on behalf of Niet Tian. It was better to let Shun Yunhe accept the challenge. If Lung Shuang Wuchen was here, he might be a good candidate. I is the leader of the Feng Tian sect. Why can't I fight for the sect? Guling Wuji was not afraid at all. He smirked proudly. Indeed, with his identity, it was suitable for him to accept the challenge. It was a pity that his strength was too weak. Guling's sect leader, are you sure you want to accept the challenge? Fong Jin's lips curled up into a cold, murderous intent as he spoke in a deep voice with a strong, threatening tone. Of course, Guling Wuji was usually calm, but he could not help but let out a thunderous roar after being provoked by Fong Jin. Guling's sect leader, of course you can accept the challenge, but I'm not sure how many times you can last out of the 9 challenges. Fong Jin remained unmoved as he said with a sinister smile, If you can't, the one who will have to accept the challenge will still be Master Beacon Emperor. You. Guling Wuji's eyes widened. He was so angry that he could not find the words to speak. It was obvious that Fong Jin was fully prepared to kill Niet Tian. It was likely that the next challengers were the real experts. At that time, if Guling Wuji couldn't even win the first round, then the pressure would still fall on Niet Tian's shoulders. Guling's sect leader, there's no need to use a butcher's knife to crack a nut. At that instant, a thunderous voice was heard, followed by a figure descending from the sky and saying in a loud voice, Please step back. Let me accept the challenge. Chapter 45:20. As the majestic voice fell, Niet Tian and Guling Wuji's expressions changed at the same time. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a familiar face. Flag Master of the Sealing Cloud Flag, Shun Yunhe. Niet Tian did not expect Shun Yunhe to step forward at such a crucial moment. Back then, when he first came to the Feng Tian sect, there was some conflict because of Shun Yunhe's son, Shun Shi, and it even made Shun Yunhe want to kill Niet Tian. However, their relationship had eased up a lot after that. Moreover, Niet Tian could clearly feel that Shun Yunhe's attitude towards him had improved a lot recently. At the same time, Niet Tian's opinion of Shun Yunhe also improved. Shun Yunhe was protective of his son, and sometimes he would disagree with Niet Tian on some matters. However, Shun Yunhe was still very qualified as the flag master of the Feng Tian sect. At least he was loyal to the Feng Tian sect. Beacon Emperor, Sect Master Guling, let me take over this battle. Shun Yunhe looked at Niet Tian and Guling Wuji, bowed slightly, and said solemnly, Before Nie Tian came, Shun Yunhe had great ambitions for the position of sect master. However, ever since Nie Tian came, especially after he saw Nie Tian's ability and means, Shun Yunhe was determined to follow the young Beacon Emperor and do his best for the Fengtian sect. Guling Wuji frowned and could not help but look at Nie Tian. Nie Tian, as the Beacon Emperor, was almost exhausted in order to awaken the lifeline. The next battle should be taken over by Guling Wuji as the sect master. However, Guling Wuji was not afraid of the battle. He knew that he was not as strong as Shun Yunhe, so this was not the time to show off. Nie Tian thought for a while and finally nodded. It seems that the Fengtian sect is united. Fang Jin's lips curled into a cold smirk upon seeing this. He clapped his hands and said, "That's fine too. Why don't we let the experts of the Fengtian sect face the experts here?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened. This Fang Jin was simply too vicious. The experts present all came from the Saints' World. There were even some experts from Peak Saints' Worlds. How could the Fengtian sect fight against the whole world? However, the situation had already reached this point. Even if Nie Tian didn't agree, there was nothing he could do. The Fengtian sect is not afraid of you. Shun Yunhe's aura was like a rainbow. With a low roar, the power of thunderclouds erupted around him. It was berserk and blazing like thunder from the nine heavens. Very good. Seeing Shun Yunhe's imposing manner, Fang Jin was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "So Flag Master Shun has such strength. No wonder you dare to challenge all the experts in the world." "Kid, cut the crap." Shun Yunhe called out coldly and said straightforwardly, "Tell the person behind you to come out and fight." Shun Yunhe was not an idiot. How could he not know that someone must have been behind the Heaven Feng sect's back when a young brat like Fang Jin was going against him? Fang Jin frowned and looked at the surrounding pavilions. He bowed slightly and said loudly, "I am Fang Jin of the Feng family of Dubby. I would like to invite all the prodigies of the world to challenge the experts of the Fengtian sect. Seniors, is there anyone who is willing to fight?" As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place fell silent. Fang Jin was young, yet he dared to speak in such a manner. It was rather annoying. Even if he was a direct descendant of the Feng family of Dubhe, he did not have the right to speak in such a manner. However, the people in the pavilions did not mind too much. After all, Fang Jin had already made quite a name for himself. A few more words did not matter. However, after Fang Jin's invitation, the entire place fell silent. No one stepped forward for a very long time. There were many experts in the pavilions, but most of them maintained a wait-and-see attitude and did not want to stand out. Even those who had ulterior motives against the Fengtian sect did not dare to rashly step forward. They chose to wait and see. "What? Seniors, are all of you so modest?" Fang Jin did not expect such a situation. He could not help but frown and sneered. "Or do all of you think that Flag Master Shun is too powerful and that you are afraid?" His provocative words caused the people in the pavilions to frown repeatedly. Even those who were usually calm felt that Fang Jin was a little too arrogant. Everyone here was an expert from all over the world. How could a junior like him mock them? "Aren't you afraid of making enemies for the Feng family of Dubhe? Since everyone is so polite, then let me go first." However, not long after Fang Jin's words faded, a low and deep voice rang out, following which a skinny and short green-clothed elder stepped through the air. His imposing aura was as majestic as a mountain, faintly suppressing Shun Yunhe. Yintong. Guling Wuji had already retreated to the side. When he saw the old man in green, his eyes sank and his expression changed. "Senior, do you know this person?" Standing beside Guling Wuji, Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw the latter's reaction. His name is Yin Tong, the vice-sect leader of the Gia sect. Guling Wuji's eyes were cold as he said in a deep voice, "He's from the Gia sect." No wonder he stepped forward so impatiently. Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Previously in the Wind Ghost Valley, he and Devil's Knight had encountered the other vice-sect leader of the Gia sect, Yanqing. At that time, Yanqing was fighting with Devil's Knight, but he was accidentally defeated by Devil's Knight and refined into a soul puppet. However, Yin Qing was extremely powerful. He was only tricked by Devil's Night. Judging from Yin Tong's aura, his strength was not inferior to Yin Qing's. Shen Yunhe was probably in danger in this battle. May I know how to address you, senior? Fang Jin was overjoyed when he saw someone stepping forward to fight. He took a step forward and bowed. Kid, there's nothing for you to do here. Step back. Yin Tong's face was gloomy as he said in a cold tone. Fang Jin frowned and wanted to say something. However, he was so frightened by Yin Tong's cold stare that he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth and left the square dejectedly. High up in the sky, only two figures were left facing each other coldly. They were like two mountains, releasing a powerful and oppressive aura. Old man Yin Tong, I didn't expect my opponent to be you. Shen Yunhe looked at Yin Tong and said in a deep voice. The thunderclouds around him surged and formed a sea of thunderbolts in the void. He was no stranger to Yin Tong. He had even fought with him before. However, at that time, both of their strengths had not reached their peak, and it was not a life-and-death battle. They had only exchanged a few blows. However, it was different today. Although it was not a life-and-death battle, both of them were prepared to die. At this moment, they were not only representing themselves, but also their respective sections. For both sides, this battle was a battle where they could only win and not lose. Shen Yunhe, it's been a while. Yin Tong's lips twitched coldly, and he said with a cold smile, We haven't fought for many years. I wonder what level your 9 thundercloud storms has reached. Compared to your elder brother, Shen Yinqing, who is stronger? Yin Tong, what do you mean? Shen Yunhe's eyes darkened, and he asked Yin Tong when he heard the name of his deceased elder brother. Shen Yinqing was Shen Yunhe's elder brother. He was also the previous leader of the Fengtian sect. A few years ago, Shen Yinqing had gone on a mission for the sect and had not been heard from since. How could Shen Yunhe not be excited when Yin Tong mentioned Shen Yinqing? Shen Yunhe, you still don't know, but your missing elder brother is dead. Yin Tong's lips twitched, and he said with a gloomy expression, The one who killed him is me. Chapter 45:21. What did you say? Up in the sky, Shen Yunhe's pupils shrank when he heard the news of his brother's death. His red eyes were filled with murderous intent as he roared like thunder. Shen Yinqing was dead, and the murderer was Yin Tong, who was standing in front of him. How could Shen Yunhe not be angry? Shen Yinqing died a long time ago. He died a horrible death. Yin Tong sensed Shen Yunhe's anger. He curled his lips and said, He was hit by my Xianin curse. I pierced through his shoulder blades and imprisoned him in the Gia sex prison. However, I have to admit that your brother had the strongest desire to live I've ever seen. The Xianin curse tortured him for more than 10 years. It wasn't until his entire body was corroded by the curse that he breathed his last. When he died, all that was left of him was an incomplete skeleton. No one was there to collect his body. How miserable! Enough! Yin Tong's words were like steel needles that pierced Shen Yunhe's heart. He was completely enraged and roared like a lion. Shen Yunhe had grown up with his brother Shen Yinqing. Their friendship was even greater than that of a normal brother. Now, Yin Tong was using Shen Yinqing to provoke him. How could he tolerate this? Can't take it anymore. Yin Tong's lips curled up into a cold smile. At the same time, a dark aura gushed out of his body and condensed into evil runes in the air that spread in all directions. Yin Tong, you deserve to die. Shen Yunhe could no longer restrain himself. He roared in anger, and the thunderclouds around him surged. The aura of thunder spread and caused the wind to howl. In his rage, the thunderclouds inside Shen Yunhe's body completely erupted. His entire body was like a thunderous mountain, constantly releasing the terrifying power of thunder. Be angry. The angrier you are, the better. Yin Tong was not the least bit afraid of Shen Yunhe's attack. Instead, he revealed a trace of madness and shouted. He revealed the matter of Shen Yinqing in order to provoke Shen Yunhe and make him fall into a state of madness. I'll kill you. Shen Yunhe roared in anger. He slammed his palm down, and tens of thousands of lightning bolts appeared in the sky. They rumbled like a landslide as they pressed down on Yin Tong. The corners of Yin Tong's mouth curled up into a cold smile. His figure flashed, and an extremely terrifying black vortex appeared in his palm. It instantly expanded and enveloped his entire body, directly cutting off the power of lightning. Nye Tian and Guling Wuji had already retreated to the central viewing pavilion. When they saw the scene in front of them, they could not help but frown, and their faces darkened. The darkness energy Yin Tong released was extremely strange. It actually had a natural resistance to Shun Yunhe's lightning energy. Moreover, the two of them could see that Shun Yunhe was in a frenzied state, as if he had been provoked by something. Bang! At that moment, a muffled sound rang out in the sky. A blood-soaked figure flew out from the lightning, leaving a trail of blood in the air. It was Shun Yunhe. When everyone saw this scene, they couldn't help but gasp in unison, and they were shocked speechless. Everyone had already predicted this battle. They all knew that Shun Yunhe would not be able to defeat Yin Tong. After all, as the deputy sect leader of the Gia sect, Yin Tong's strength should be above that of the Fengtian sect's flagmaster. However, no one had expected that Shun Yunhe could not even withstand one move from Yin Tong. In any case, Shun Yunhe was the Sky Beacon flagmaster. Even if he was weaker than Yin Tong, he should not be weaker by this much. High up in the sky, Shun Yunhe barely stabilized his body. There was a bloody hole the size of a baby's fist on his right shoulder. Blood gushed out like a fountain and dyed half of his body red. However, his aura did not weaken in the slightest. Instead, the power of lightning was even more violent than before, stimulated by the vigorous blood energy. Shun Yunhe, if your 9 thundercloud storms is only at this level, then I'm really disappointed. Yin Tong stood with his hands behind his back, and a sinister smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Your strength is far inferior to that of your elder brother. Old bastard. Shun Yunhe was furious. His face was distorted and ferocious as he roared. Today, I, Shun Yunhe, will kill you even if I have to risk my life to avenge my deceased brother. Then bring it on. Yin Tong chuckled in an extremely provocative manner. 9 thundercloud storms, heavenly lightning strike. Shun Yunhe's eyes widened in anger as he roared crazily. He no longer held back and disregarded his injuries. He even took the initiative to ignite his blood energy and activate the power of the thundercloud. Boom, crack. As his voice faded away, a monstrous thunderbolt that stretched for thousands of meters appeared in the sky. It was like the Milky Way hanging upside down, just like a blazing, sharp blade that split heaven and earth. What a powerful aura. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. Their expressions changed drastically. Even the experts in the observation pavilion could not help but be affected by Shun Yunhe's aura. They were all moved. How could they not see that Shun Yunhe was completely fighting with his life on the line? He was simply trying to perish together with Yin Tong. Nye Tian and Guling Wuji's expressions changed drastically. Their hearts were in their throats. They did not expect Shun Yunhe to be so crazy. That's more like it. Yin Tong raised his head and looked at the thunderbolt. He was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Unfortunately, this kind of power is still not enough to kill me." As soon as he finished speaking, the black light around him shone brightly and condensed into a giant black snake that was tens of thousands of meters long. The snake's body shook in the air, and like an arrow that had left the bow, it rushed straight toward the thunderbolt. Bang! In the next moment, the thunderbolt fell and hit the head of the giant black snake. It immediately exploded with a violent force that caused the surrounding wind and clouds to howl. Everyone below felt the same pressure and used their energy to resist. Everyone looked up at the sky attentively, for fear of missing any exciting scene. Boom, boom, boom. Bang, bang, bang. Chi, chi, chi. The thunderbolt and the giant snake wrestled with each other in the air, causing the world to shake and roar. A moment later, a shocking scene occurred. The giant black snake suddenly opened its giant mouth and began to devour the thunderbolt. Everyone was stunned by this scene, and they were instantly stunned. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. How is this possible? Shun Yunhe was also stunned and shouted in horror. His thundercloud energy had been devoured by Yin Tong. To him, This was too shocking. In the blink of an eye, the thunderbolt that was originally powerful was completely devoured by the giant black snake. The giant black snake did not grow in size after obtaining the thundercloud energy, but its aura increased by several times. The rolling force was incomparably violent, and it directly pressed down on Shen Yunhe. Shen Yunhe's expression changed greatly. His eyes trembled. It was not from fear, or despair, but from deep humiliation and unwillingness. He had not avenged his brother's death, but he was going to die in the hands of his enemy. One could imagine the unwillingness in his heart. Shen Yunhe, your expression now is very similar to Shen Yunqing's. In the void, Yin Tong's voice sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell. This battle should be over. Let me personally send you to see your brother. Chapter 45:22. As Yin Tong's voice echoed in the sky, an aura of death instantly spread out and filled the void tens of thousands of meters away. The expressions of the experts in the viewing pavilion changed drastically when they felt the terrifying aura of death. A mere deputy sect master of the Gia sect actually possesses such strength. This is truly an eye-opener. The seventh sacred world of cultivators has an extremely special position in the all heavens. The cultivators here are not inferior to the experts of some of the top sacred worlds. This deputy sect Master Yan's methods are impressive. He's a ruthless person. Everyone discussed with excitement in their eyes. It was as if they could already see Shen Yunhe's corpse disappearing without a trace. Nie Tian and Guling Wuji stared at Yin Tong from the viewing pavilion in the center. Every single nerve in their body was stretched taut. They were clearly extremely nervous. They were prepared to accept Shen Yunhe's failure, but they didn't expect that Shen Yunhe would be defeated so miserably to the point where his body and soul would vanish. They did not know what Yin Tong had said to Shen Yunhe to make him so impulsive and fight to the death. At this moment, they were still holding on to a sliver of hope that Yin Tong would be wary of the Fengtian sect and not dare to kill Shen Yunhe. Shen Yunhe, accept your death obediently. A cold voice rang out from the terrifying aura of death. Yin Tong's eyes flashed fiercely, and he was determined to kill. Even if he was in the Fengtian sect, he would not have any misgivings. It was a fair duel between him and Shen Yunhe. Even if killing Shen Yunhe would infuriate the Fengtian sect, the Fengtian sect would not dare to do anything to him in front of everyone. Furthermore, since he had already told Shen Yunhe about Shen Yunqing, how could he let Shen Yunhe live? Old pig. Shen Yunhe instantly felt the aura of death approaching, but he was not afraid at all. He roared and cursed. His face was as ferocious as a beast as he said in a deep voice, "Even if I die, I'll make you pay the price." With that, he suddenly took a step forward. The aura around him shook and dispersed the surrounding aura of death. At the next moment, something unexpected happened. Shen Yunhe took a deep breath. The power of the thunderclouds around him surged back into his martial body, turning into a stream of lightning that flowed towards his 9 yuan meridians. Yin Tong could sense the changes in Shen Yunhe's body, causing him to involuntarily frown. Cold, he said, "Shen Yunhe, are you still trying to play tricks on your deathbed?" Bang, bang, bang. Just as he finished speaking, a muffled explosion came from within Shen Yunhe's body. Cripple my own yuan meridian? Yin Tong immediately realized what Shen Yunhe was doing, but he was even more surprised and puzzled. He had never imagined that Shen Yunhe would actually use his thundercloud bloodline to reverse attack his yuan meridians and directly destroy his own yuan meridians. He was even more confused. Why would Shen Yunhe do this? Wasn't he insane to cripple his own yuan meridians? Old man Yin Tong, I'll let you experience the true 9 thundercloud storms of my Chun clan today. Shen Yunhe's 9 yuan meridians were destroyed by the power of the thunderclouds, but his eyes were still filled with killing intent. He roared at Yin Tong. Yin Tong frowned. In the next moment, he thought of something and exclaimed, "Not good." In an instant, Yin Tong understood that Shen Yunhe was sacrificing his 9 yuan meridians to stimulate the power of the thundercloud bloodline to the limit and unleash the legendary 9 thundercloud storms. The 9 thundercloud storms was the highest level of the thundercloud bloodline of the Chen clan. It was said to have the power to kill any martial artist. Previously, when Yin Tong killed Shun Yinqing, the latter did not even have the chance to use the 9 thundercloud storms. Who would have thought that Shun Yunhe would be so crazy that he would not hesitate to cripple his own Yuan meridians to kill Yin Tong? Realizing that something was wrong, Yin Tong could no longer care about anything else. His figure paused in the air, and he hurriedly retreated. Bang! However, at that moment, Shun Yunhe's body shook. 9 terrifying bolts of lightning actually burst out of his body and directly shattered his flesh and bones. He turned into a bloody light in the air. However, at the last moment, Shun Yunhe's eyes were filled with satisfaction from getting his revenge. There was even a hint of a smile on his face. This was because he knew that once the 9 thundercloud storms was used, Yin Tong would definitely die. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the 9 bolts of lightning transformed into 9 thundercloud dragons in the air. Their auras shook the heavens and the earth as if they were going to tear the entire world apart. The giant black snake could not withstand the impact of the 9 thundercloud dragons and directly collapsed into pieces. Following that, the 9 thundercloud dragons swooped down and enveloped Yin Tong. Yin Tong suddenly felt the pressure in the air around him increase so much that he was almost unable to move. Damn it, Yin Tong shouted in a low voice. Following that, dark runes were released from his body and covered his body like armor. Furthermore, there was actually a surge of lightning energy surging around the runic armor. At that moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the scene in the sky. They were shocked to the extreme, and they were intoxicated. In the next moment, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the 9 thundercloud dragons instantly gathered and transformed into a thundercloud storm that wrapped around Yin Tong. Kaboom! In the blink of an eye, the thundercloud storm rapidly gathered and then exploded, turning into bolts of lightning energy that shot in all directions. Hundreds of thousands of meters of space around them felt a huge tremor at the same time. Everyone involuntarily activated their Yuan meridians to defend themselves. Only then were they able to withstand the waves of lightning energy. After a long time, the thundercloud aura in the air gradually dissipated. Everyone finally reacted and looked at the thundercloud storm that had yet to dissipate in the sky. They were dumbfounded. No one had expected that Shun Yunhe, who was originally at an extreme disadvantage, would explode with such a terrifying power at the moment of his death. Especially the thundercloud storm formed by the 9 thundercloud dragons. Even a martial artist at the peak of the sky martial arts realm would be crushed to pieces in the storm. The result of this battle was mutual destruction. In the central pavilion, Nie Tian and Guling Wuji stood in silence. Their bodies were like stones, and they only moved after a long time. So, this is the 9 thundercloud storms of the Shun clan. Guling Wuji said solemnly, Deputy Sect Leader of the Ghost Cliff, Yin Tong, dying under the 9 thundercloud storms is not an injustice. But Nye Tian's face was gloomy, and his eyes were shining with a strange and cold light. At this time, he opened the celestial demon eyes at the same time. He was like a fierce beast that was about to eat people in the next moment. Nye Tian, Flag Leader Shun, Guling Wuji sensed that Nye Tian's aura was strange. He thought that Nye Tian was grieving for Shun Yunhe's death and was about to speak, but was interrupted by Nye Tian. He is not dead, Nye Tian said cold with a murderous look on his face. Who is not dead? Guling Wuji was stunned and asked in shock. Shun Yunhe was not dead? Or Yin Tong was not dead? Shun Yunhe destroyed his own Yuan meridians and was crushed to pieces by the power of the 9 thunderclouds. He could not be more dead than he was. Yin Tong was trapped in the thundercloud storm and had no chance of survival. Yin Tong is not dead. Nye Tian's lips seemed to twitch, and he almost said the words through his teeth. Chapter 45:23. Nye Tian's voice was very low. Every single word he said was more terrifying than a thunderclap from the ninth heaven, reverberating in Guling Wuji's ears. Yin Tong didn't die? How is that possible? The thunderstorm condensed by the 9 thunder dragons was so powerful that even the 5 Deans would not be able to survive. Although Yin Tong was strong, he was still far from being comparable to a true peak expert. How could he survive in the thunderstorm with his strength? Bang! Just as Guling Wuji's eyes widened, the thunderstorm in the sky shook and exploded, turning into thunderclouds and dissipating. In the murky thunderclouds, a figure covered in blood gradually became clear and appeared in front of everyone. The bloody figure was none other than Yin Tong. He actually survived under the thundercloud 9 storms. Gasp! This unbelievable scene caused everyone to gasp in unison. Their gazes froze for a moment, and they were once again petrified on the spot. No one would have thought that a mere Yin Tong could actually survive a thunderstorm of that degree. But how was that possible? Could it be that Yin Tong was hiding his strength? That he was already a powerhouse at the peak of martial arts? But this was too ridiculous. One should know that even the leader of the Gia sect was not at the peak of martial arts. If Yin Tong was at the peak of martial arts, why would he be a deputy sect leader? Everything was like a huge black hole that was placed in front of everyone. No one could look straight at it, understand it, or believe it. He. Just then, Yin Tong suddenly laughed. His bloody body shook and trembled. It was obvious that he was very weak, but he was very happy. He could not contain the joy of surviving a disaster. Shen Yunhe, you can't kill me after all. You can't avenge Shen Yunqing. Yin Tong chuckled as if he was laughing at Shen Yunhe's incompetence. So what if he destroyed his own Qi meridians? So what if it was the thunderstorm of 9 storms? Didn't I, Yin Tong, survive? Shen Yunqing. In the central pavilion far away, Guling Wuji's expression changed when he heard this name. He was shocked. Previously, due to the battle between Shen Yunhe and Yin Tong, the thunder force was too violent and no one could hear what they were saying. Now that everything had settled, Guling Wuji finally heard Yin Tong's words clearly. Judging from Yin Tong's words, he was the one who killed Shen Yunqing. That must be it. Guling Wuji was very smart. He immediately understood everything and exclaimed, Shen Yunhe must have learned of Shen Yunqing's death when he flew into a rage. What good Yin Tong? Not only did he possess strange strength, he was even more adept at attacking the mind. However, Yin Tong would never have guessed that it was precisely because he had thoroughly angered Shen Yunhe that the latter had crippled his own Yuan Meridian to use the thundercloud 9 storms. If it wasn't for this, Yin Tong wouldn't be in such a sorry state right now. Understanding this, Guling Wuji's eyes surged with cold, killing intent. But he still couldn't figure out how Yin Tong survived the thunderstorm. Outside his body, there was a layer of armor formed by dark runes. Outside the armor, there was a layer of thunder force similar to the thunderstorm. At this time, Nietan, who had been silent all this time, opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, it was that rune armor and that layer of thunder force that saved his life. In the last scene of the battle, Niet Tian opened his godly eyes and saw everything clearly. When Guling Wuji heard Niet Tian's words, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he immediately came to a realization. The rune armor must have been formed by Yin Tong's profound Yin curse, and the profound Yin curse had a natural restraint on the thundercloud power. And if Guling Wuji's guess was right, that layer of thunder force that was similar to the thunderstorm should have been obtained by Yin Tong from Shen Yunqing. Yin Tong killed Shen Yunqing and seized the thundercloud power. It was very reasonable. Moreover, Shen Yunhe's thundercloud 9 bursts was used after his Yuan meridians were destroyed, so he couldn't display the full power of the thundercloud 9 bursts. The profound Yin curse restrained the thundercloud power, and the collision of the thundercloud power, as well as the inherent weakness of the thundercloud 9 bursts, had allowed Yin Tong to survive. The crowd looked at Yin Tong in disbelief. After they recovered from their shock, they began to discuss quietly. This deputy sect leader of the Ghost Cliff strength should not be underestimated. It is really surprising that he could survive such a storm. The power of the storm was extremely terrifying. Not to mention an ordinary sky martial saint ancestor. Even a peak expert would find it hard to resist it. Yin Tong must have a way to restrain the thundercloud storm. Otherwise, there is no way he could have survived. Everyone discussed among themselves. The way they looked at Yin Tong had changed, revealing a different kind of respect. Everyone, I was lucky to win the first battle against the Fengtian sect. The rest is up to you. After a while, Yin Tong slightly recovered and the bloodstains on his body faded. He cupped his hands and said to the crowd in a loud voice, although he had won this battle, he had also suffered serious injuries and no longer had the strength to fight again. Deputy sect leader of the Ghost Cliff, Yin Tong. Yin Tong was about to return to the pavilion when a low voice sounded. Then, a figure as sharp as a long sword appeared. A pair of cold eyes locked onto Yin Tong. Lord Beacon Emperor. Yin Tong's eyes narrowed when he saw that the person was Nie Tian, but he did not panic. He sneered and said, "Is Lord Beacon Emperor going to fight in person?" Deputy sect leader of the Ghost Cliff, Yin Tong, you killed the Fengtian sect's Sealing Cloud flagmaster, Shun Yunhe. Nie Tian did not seem to hear Yin Tong's words. His eyes were cold and he said in a deep voice, "I will kill you." Yin Tong felt the cold, killing intent and could not help but change his expression. He was taken aback, as he actually sensed a strong threat from Nie Tian. At that moment, he felt that Nie Tian, who was only at stage 1 of Sky Perception Realm, was like a towering mountain that oppressed him. He, who was close to the peak of the Sky Martial Arts Divine Ancestor Realm, was like a small hill that he could only look up to. In that case, I will look forward to Lord Beacon Emperor's revenge. But soon, Yin Tong calmed down and sneered. Then, he moved and returned to the pavilion. Flag Master Shun, rest in peace. I will avenge you. Nie Tian looked up into the sky and sensed a wisp of blood. Lord Beacon Emperor, this is only the first battle. At that moment, a cold laugh was heard. It was Fang Jin. He looked at Nie Tian and said proudly, "The game has just begun. Why are you so serious, Lord Beacon Emperor?" Nie Tian frowned and his eyes glittered. He said, Fang Jin, no matter what happens next, I will not let you go since you are the one who started this. Boom! As soon as he uttered these words, Fang Jin's divine sense rumbled, and he felt as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. The sudden despair made him break out in cold sweat. Face as pale as a sheet, he stared at Nie Tian as if he were looking at a devil god. Chapter 45:24. In that instant, Fang Jin felt as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. That kind of despair almost destroyed his soul. Fortunately, he was a high-rank Saint Alchemy master, and his soul energy was far superior to ordinary people. He regained consciousness after a short while. Ew. This is an ocular technique. Fang Jin's pupils shrank slightly as he looked at Nie Tian with shock and unconcealable fear in his eyes. He had not expected Nie Tian to be an other pupil cultivator. There were very few other pupils cultivators in the world. Apart from a few extremely terrifying other pupils were not very useful in the later stages of the martial path, other than improving a cultivator's perception and allowing them to see through unusual things. However, Nie Tian's other pupils were completely different. The instant attack on his soul was so terrifying that it almost killed Fang Jin, a high-rank Saint Alchemy master, on the spot. Fang Jin's soul energy was far superior to ordinary people, but he was almost killed by Nie Tian with a single glance. One could imagine how shocked he was. I will do what I say. Nie Tian paid no attention to Fang Jin's astonishment and spoke coldly. Nie Tian had to bear some responsibility for the Fengtian sect's current situation. Even though he had a firm heart and handled matters calmly, he was still too young and could not help but let his emotions affect his decisions. He could have ignored Fang Jin's provocation. Even if he had been more direct, the Fengtian sect would not have had to accept the challenges of so many powerhouses present. However, Nie Tian's fault was that he was young and frivolous. The main culprit for the current situation was still Fang Jin. Fang Jin had provoked the Fengtian sect time and time again, which had touched Nie Tian's bottom line. Therefore, no matter the outcome of the 9 challenges, Nie Tian would definitely pursue Fong Jin to the end. Lord Beacon Emperor, please wait. Nie Tian turned to leave after saying that, but Fong Jin stopped him. What else do you want to say? Nie Tian's body froze. He did not turn around and asked cold Fong Jin with his back facing him. This is only the first of the 9 challenges. I think the Beacon Emperor just can't accept the result of this match. Fong Jin looked at Nie Tian's back and sensed the contempt in his eyes. The gloominess in his eyes intensified as he said in a deep voice, "However, I have to warn you first. If the one standing at the end of the 9 battles is not from the Fong Tian sect, then the Fong Tian sect will be considered to have failed the challenge." What do you mean? Nie Tian frowned, but he still didn't turn around. Fong Jin sneered twice and said, 9 challenges, each side will send 9 people. The last one standing will be the winner. Upon hearing Fong Jin's words, Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed and his eyes darkened. At this moment, he finally understood how vicious Fong Jin's heart was. 9 people taking turns to fight. This was an absolutely cruel way of fighting. For example, if Yin Tong killed Shen Yunhe in the first battle, he could still stay on the battlefield and fight the next person from the Fong Tian sect. If Yin Tong won again, he could still continue fighting. However, Yin Tong was too heavily injured and couldn't fight anymore, so he took the initiative to leave the battlefield. As such, the Fong Tian sect had to defeat 9 experts in order to obtain the final victory. There was definitely a mastermind behind Fong Jin. This person's strength far surpassed ordinary experts, and it was very likely that he was a peak expert. Nie Tian had already guessed that the mastermind behind Fong Jin was most likely from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Palace. After all, the Heaven's Pivot Fong clan was not an ordinary small clan. For Fong Jin to be willing to risk his life, it must be a super force. In fact, the sudden return of the Abyss lineage might be closely related to the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Palace. As for the Human Emperor's Palace and the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's goal, Nie Tian couldn't be sure. It might be Nie Tian himself, the Fong Tian sect, or the entire 7 Cultivators Sacred World. After all, the 7 Cultivators Sacred World's location was too special. Once the heavens collapsed, the 7 Cultivators Sacred World would definitely be a place that many forces would fight for. Fong Jin had a peak expert behind him, but the Fong Tian sect didn't. The strongest person in the Fong Tian sect, apart from the dead Shen Yunhe, was probably Guling Wuji and Fan Zhong. However, Guling Wuji wasn't a combat cultivator. Coupled with his old age and declining vitality, his combat strength was probably below Fan Zhong's. If the person behind Fong Jin were to fight, the entire Fong Tian sect wouldn't be a match for him. This kid is really vicious. If I knew this would happen, I would have killed him. Guling Wuji and Fan Zhong were standing in the central pavilion. How could they not understand Fong Jin's intentions? Fan Zhong gritted his teeth and said, "Based on the current situation, the Beacon Emperor has no room to retreat." Guling Wuji was relatively calm and said solemnly, "Sect Master Guling, where's your friend, Grandmaster Qing Qi?" Fan Zhong sighed. He suddenly realized that he hadn't seen Qing Qi and couldn't help but ask. He went to invite someone. I hope he can make it in time. Guling Wuji shook his head and smiled bitterly. Guling Wuji was well aware of the relationship between Qing Qi and Nie Tian. Not only was Nie Tian the Beacon Sky Emperor, but he was also the Star Sky Sacred Leader. Therefore, Qing Qi would definitely not allow anything to happen to Nie Tian. However, Qing Qi would probably take a long time. Could he really make it back in time? Sect Master Guling, why don't we postpone the challenge? Fan Zhong's eyes trembled, and he said excitedly, as long as they could postpone the challenge and wait for Qing Qi to invite help, wouldn't everything be solved? Do you think that's possible? The corner of Guling Wuji's mouth twitched. He glanced around the pavilion helplessly. It was obvious that there were many enemies of the Fong Tian sect in the pavilion. Otherwise, Fong Jin alone wouldn't have been able to push things to this point. On the surface, Nie Tian seemed to have suffered a loss. However, in reality, even if he didn't agree to Fong Jin's suggestion, things wouldn't be any better. Sigh. Fan Zhong sighed and couldn't help but say, that beacon's emperor isn't someone to be trifled with. If he was here, he might have a solution. Now, all the pressure is on Sir Beacon Emperor. Guling Wuji was helpless and didn't say anything else. Sir Beacon Emperor, you haven't responded yet. Are you afraid? Fang Jin provoked when he saw that Nie Tian didn't speak for a long time. If Sir Beacon Emperor can't accept a 9-man battle, why don't you admit defeat? The Beacon Sky selection will end here, but the Fengtian sect must give everyone an explanation. Fang Jin's words were arrogant and aggressive. I agree to a 9-man battle. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Nie Tian suddenly turned around. His eyes were calm like a deep lake, and not the slightest ripple could be seen within them as he spoke indifferently. Ha ha ha! Sir Beacon Emperor is indeed forthright. Fang Jin was startled at first, but he quickly reacted. He laughed and changed the topic. I wonder, who will be the next person from the Fengtian sect? Chapter 45-25. Fang Jin's tone was provocative and his eyes were filled with undisguised disdain. He was clearly asking who the next person from the Fengtian sect would be. Nie Tian's eyes flickered slightly. He suppressed the anger in his heart in the end. This was the first time he had been forced into such a situation ever since his rebirth. He had never been afraid of any opponent in the past, but this time he had to give in. This was because he was not just dealing with himself. He was dealing with the entire Fengtian sect. Lord Beacon Emperor, please allow me to fight the second battle. Before Nie Tian could speak, a deep voice came from behind him. Nie Tian turned around and looked at Fan Zhong. He did not say much and only nodded slightly. The current Fengtian sect was lacking in talents. Fan Zhong and a few others were the only ones who could fight. At that moment, before Fang Jin could speak, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared. He was dressed in a black robe and exuded a murderous aura. Senior, may I ask? Fang Jin did not expect someone to take the initiative to fight. He immediately bowed, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by the newcomer. Scram! The black-robed man's face was blurry under the black robe. He spat out a single word in a cold manner, and the air around him turned solemn. It was as if the world was about to be frozen by his murderous aura. Fang Jin was so scared that his face turned pale. He did not dare to say another word and immediately retreated to the square. Be careful of this person. Nie Tian looked at the black-robed cultivator and frowned as he secretly reminded Fan Zhong. Fan Zhong nodded. Although he did not show much emotion on his face, he felt a little uneasy. The black-robed man's aura was too cold. The kind of murderous aura was not something an ordinary cultivator could possess. Nie Tian retreated to the central pavilion, leaving only Fan Zhong and the black-robed man in the sky. The crowd could not help but discuss in low voices as they looked at the two figures facing each other. This black-robed cultivator's aura is different from ordinary people. He seems to have a great background. The black-clad cultivator does indeed give off an oppressive feeling. However, this Fan Zhong is the Fengtian sect's Tianyue bannermaster. His strength cannot be underestimated. I look forward to their battle. The Fengtian sect's talents are dwindling. There aren't many capable experts left. I hope this Tianyue flag master won't disappoint us too much. Most people did not expect things to develop to this point. Those with sharp senses had already sensed that someone was deliberately targeting the Fengtian sect. Even though everyone knew that the Fengtian sect had suffered a great loss, they did not dare to say anything. Many people could vaguely sense that the Fengtian sect was facing the danger of being annihilated despite the seemingly calm situation. How should I address you? High up in the sky, Fan Zhong calmed down and cupped his hands. Perhaps, knowing the other party's background would give him more confidence. I'll grant you an intact corpse with one move. The black-clad man ignored Fan Zhong and spoke in a cold manner. The invisible killing intent around him condensed into a tangible sharp blade. It formed a killing intense space in the void and filled the surroundings with a murderous aura. Fan Zhong's face immediately darkened. He realized that the other party was not to be underestimated. The aura around him immediately skyrocketed. The majestic aura enveloped the surrounding 10,000 meters like a mountain and condensed into an invisible protective barrier. Bang! In the next instant, a sudden clap of thunder resounded in the void. It was the result of the intense collision between the two men's auras. The black-clad man was as steady as a mountain. He did not move at all and did not even sway. On the other hand, Fan Zhong could not help but take a few steps back. He was in a sorry state before he managed to stabilize his feet. When everyone in the pavilion saw this scene, their expressions changed in unison, and they were extremely surprised. Fan Zhong was the Fengtian sect's flagmaster. Although his strength was not at its peak, he was not an ordinary person. Yet, he was actually shaken by the black-clad man's aura. The black-clad man's strength was evident. "Is this all you've got?" The black-clad man smiled coldly. There was a cold sarcasm in his arrogance. Damn it! Fan Zhong was an expert after all. Faced with his opponent's contempt, he was instantly enraged. He growled and the aura around him skyrocketed again. Endless power quickly gathered behind him. A strange peak that reached the clouds appeared. It was like a sharp sword that could split the sky, piercing through the clouds. Humph! The black-clad man only laughed coldly in the face of Fan Zhong's aura. He said coldly, "Let's end this." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the killing intent space around him suddenly shook. Then, a killing intent blade condensed from pure killing intent pierced through the air and attacked Fan Zhong. In an instant, Fan Zhong suddenly felt the aura of death approaching. An instinctive chill swept through his body, making him almost unable to move. However, he was not a weakling. He reacted instantly and retreated dozens of meters, hiding in the Tianyue strange peak. Poof! In the next instant, the killing intent blade pierced through the Tianyue strange peak and pierced Fan Zhong's neck. Fan Zhong's eyes widened. He felt warm blood spurting out. He instinctively raised his hands to cover the wound, but he could not do it no matter what. In that moment of life and death, he used all his strength to turn around and look at the central pavilion behind him. Nie Tian was in the middle of the pavilion, but he could clearly see the color of life rapidly draining from Fan Zhong's eyes. Almost right before Nie Tian's eyes, Tianyue flag master Fan Zhong had died. Fan Zhong, Nie Tian's eyes trembled. The corner of his mouth twitched. His lips were slightly parted, but the sound that came out was extremely soft. He could not believe that Fan Zhong had died just like that. Guling Wuji's expression also changed drastically. He was so shocked that he could not speak. In the blink of an eye, the Fengtian sect's two remaining flagmasters had both died. To the Fengtian sect, this was no different from a fatal blow. Feng Yun was bathed in blood, and Tianyue Mountain was broken. Was the Fengtian sect really going to face a calamity today? The people in the pavilion and the square were also stunned. The entire place was silent and oppressive, as if they had been petrified. No one had expected that Fan Zhong would be killed by the man in black in an instant. Useless. One hit. The man in black's cold voice rang out in the sky. It was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears, but in the ears of Nie Tian and the others, it was like a sharp knife stabbing into their hearts. Just as Fan Zhong's body fell, a figure flew out and caught him. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian supported Fan Zhong's body and stepped forward. He was less than 100 meters away from the man in black, and he could clearly feel the man's aura. "Kid, you're really lucky to have survived." The man in black looked at Nie Tian. His eyes under the black robe flickered as he spoke in an eerie voice. "It's you." Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He suddenly thought of something and spoke in surprise. The moment the man in black appeared, he felt that the man's aura was inexplicably familiar. At this moment, when he sensed the man in black's aura at such a close distance, he felt even more familiar. The man in black's words allowed Nie Tian to instantly confirm his identity. He was the person who had set up the ghost-killing formation in the valley at the entrance of the abyss. Feng Yun Reading Net. Chapter 45-26. Fierce Ghost Killing Formation. Nietion's mind flashed with the scenes of that day. He suppressed the shock in his heart and tried to straighten everything out. Not long ago, he had accepted Bing Ji's request and sent the heavily injured Bing Xie back to the eternal abyss. However, on his way back, he encountered the fierce ghost-killing formation in the valley. Luckily, Nietion was calm enough and used the chaotic flame to cut open a crack in the killing formation. With the help of Enfeng Boyi's demon-sealing spear, he managed to escape from death. Although Nietion did not know who set up the killing formation, he clearly remembered the aura of the killing formation. And the killing intense space of the black-robed man in front of him was extremely similar to the fierce ghost-killing formation. Moreover, the killing intense space of the black-robed man was also a killing formation. Adding on the black-robed man's words, Nietion connected the dots. Combining all these factors, Nietion was absolutely sure that the black-robed man in front of him was the person who set up the fierce ghost-killing formation to kill him. "It is indeed me." The black-robed man sneered and said, "Nietion, I really did not expect you to escape from my killing formation. If not, I would not have shown myself. But now is fine. I have suddenly changed my mind. It's too boring to kill you directly. I will kill all the people around you, and then enjoy your helpless expression. Finally, when you have tasted despair, I will kill you." Nietion suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, "Do I have any enmity with you? Why do you hate me so much? You and I have never met before." The black-robed man seemed to smile and said, "It is just that I have always taken pleasure in killing people. In my life, I have killed countless people. Those so-called monstrous martial arts geniuses have died in my hands. But I have never seen a genius like you. If I can kill you, it should be very fun." Nietion frowned and slightly clenched his fists. The black-robed man's words were clearly 4 words, excited to see the prey. Although the black-clothed man's tone was very calm, Nietion could feel the former's madness and hysteria that seeped into his soul. Perhaps, to the black-clothed man, killing was like eating a meal for an ordinary person, and a rare genius like Nietion was like a table of delicacies to him. Moreover, it was a rare thing that he had never seen before, so he naturally wanted to savor it slowly and carefully. Nietion did not say anything else. He turned around and left with Fan Zhong. The black-clothed man was crazily bloodthirsty, but he should not have provoked Nietion. Everyone looked at the black-clothed man in the sky, and their expressions revealed unconcealable shock. They could not help but whisper to each other, "Who the hell is this guy? How could he be so strong?" Fan Zhong was the leader of the Fengtian sect, after all. Even if he wasn't the strongest, he was definitely not weak. How could he be killed by this person with a single move? The Fengtian sect has lost 2 flag leaders in a row. I'm afraid that no one else will be able to fight. This time, the Fengtian sect is in big trouble. Among the crowd, there were people who shook their heads and were worried for the Fengtian sect. The black-clothed man was too powerful. Even Fan Zhong was killed in 1 move. Who else could fight? Is there anyone else from the Fengtian sect who want to fight? At this moment, the black-clothed man's voice was heard. He was arrogant and provoked directly. However, the entire place was dead silent. No one responded. After witnessing the black-clothed man's terrifying means, who else would dare to fight? Even Guling Wuji's battle strength was not stronger than Fan Zhong's. Even if he went up, he would probably die. "Senior Guling, you're no match for him." In the central viewing pavilion, Guling Wuji was already prepared to fight, but he was stopped by Nietion. The latter's face was cold, but his tone was extremely calm as he spoke faintly. "Lord Beacon Emperor." Guling Wuji was stunned when he saw Nietion put Fan Zhong down and slowly step forward. He then reacted in the next moment. Nietion wanted to fight personally. But wasn't that courting death? Guling Wuji had absolute confidence in Nietion's strength and talent, but Nietion's cultivation level was too low. If Nietion was in the 9th level of the Tianqi realm, even if he had not reached the peak, Guling Wuji believed that Nietion would be able to fight against anyone. But Nietion was only in the 1st level of the Heaven Perception realm. How could he fight against the black-clothed man? However, who else in the Fengtian sect could fight against the black-clothed man. Lord Beacon Emperor, please stay. Let me fight. At that moment, a deep roar could be heard. Following that, a silhouette shot out like an arrow that had just been released from a bow. Nietion's eyes narrowed. Then, he saw that the person who came out was a middle-aged man in an azure robe. His expression was stern, and his figure was tall and straight like a mountain. Protector Tian Qian. Guling Wuji's expression changed, and he exclaimed in shock. The person who came out was the head of the 8 protectors of the Fengtian sect, Protector Tian Qian, Zhang Wanchen. In the Fengtian sect, other than the emperor, 2 sects and 4 flags, there were the 8 protectors. Protector Tian Qian, Zhang Wanchen, was the head of the 8 protectors. He was very strong and was comparable to the 4 flag leaders. However, Zhang Wanchen was facing an opponent who was much stronger than the 4 flag leaders. How could he possibly win? Nietion's eyes darkened like an enraged lion. He could tell that Zhang Wanchen accepted the challenge because he did not want him, the Beacon Emperor, to be in danger. At that moment, he could only hope that Zhang Wanchen was strong enough to bring him a surprise. The Fengtian sect really has no one else. They actually sent someone like you to fight. Although the face of the black-clothed man could not be seen in the sky, his arrogance could be seen from his tone. Cut the crap. Make your move. Zhang Wanchen's aura surged, and there was the sound of crashing waves in the void. Heaven and earth were filled with a vast aura that made people feel like they were at the bottom of the sea. When everyone saw this scene, their expressions changed slightly, and they could not hide their surprise. No one thought that the ordinary-looking Zhang Wanchen would have such strength. Protector Tian Qian already has such strength. Guling Wuji was also very surprised and exclaimed in his heart. Judging from the aura alone, Zhang Wanchen was not weaker than Fan Zhong at all. In fact, he was much stronger than Fan Zhong. However, Zhang Wanchen was much younger than Fan Zhong. In terms of the age of a sacred ancestor, he was in the prime of his life. If there were no accidents, he might even grow into a peak powerhouse in the future. Oh, I didn't know you had such strength. I underestimated you. The black-clothed man sneered and was a little interested. Zhang Wanchen's face was cold and solemn. The power around him was extremely violent. It was his bloodline power, Whale Wave. Rumble. The power of Whale Wave spread out and shook heaven and earth. It was like the Milky Way was pouring down and pressing down on the black-clothed man. It was obvious that Zhang Wanchen knew he was inferior to the black-clothed man and wanted to take the initiative by striking first. The black-clothed man felt the enormous pressure coming from the void, but the corners of his mouth curled up coldly. He said indifferently, "Your strength is not weak. Unfortunately, it is still not enough for me to use one move." Feng Yin Reading Net. Chapter 45:27. High up in the sky, the man in black stood solemnly, surrounded by a murderous aura. He was like a mountain of killing intent, filling the entire world with a suffocating murderous aura. Such a majestic and terrifying murderous aura was rare even for those who had reached the peak of their strength and killed people like flies. There is only one group of people who could have such a murderous aura. Assassins. It was obvious that the man in black was an extremely terrifying assassin. Whale Wave, 10,000 feet, Cloud Wave. At this moment, Zhang Wanchen, the protector of Tian Qian, was not afraid at all. With a low roar, the power of the Whale Wave surged around him, and the enormous momentum carried the power of heaven and earth, turning into endless wild waves that blasted toward the man in black. What a powerful aura! Everyone's expressions changed when they felt the powerful aura coming from high up in the sky. They looked at the man in disbelief. When Zhang Wanchen first appeared, everyone thought that he was almost a cannon fodder. However, the strength he displayed now had the power to shake the man in black. It had to be said that Zhang Wanchen's strength was definitely not weaker than Shen Yunhe, Fan Zhong, and the others. The black-robed man stood coldly in the air. As if he had sensed Zhang Wanchen's aura, he moved and took a step forward. In an instant, the space of killing intent around him rumbled, releasing countless sharp blades formed from his killing intent. Like thousands of arrows, they shot out at Zhang Wanchen. Boom! The next moment, the two forces collided, and the world shook. The surrounding space was directly distorted by the impact of the huge force, and a space-time storm burst out from the space-time cracks. In an instant, the sky turned dark, and the sun and moon lost their colors. The huge force exploded in all directions, and the two figures were completely submerged. Everyone looked at the turbid sky with shocked expressions, as if they had been petrified. Protector Tian Xian, Zhang Wanchen, had indeed amazed everyone. After a long time, the turbid sky began to gradually clear up. High up in the sky, a figure stood, bathed in blood. His body trembled slightly, and he could not stand any longer. This figure was not a person, but Zhang Wanchen. On the other side, the man in black's black robe was the same as before, and even the space of killing intent around him was undamaged. However, those with slightly higher realms could sense that the black-clothed man's killing intent space had weakened considerably. Zhang Wanchen had suffered a crushing defeat. However, he had injured the black-robed man and weakened his killing intent space. The world was deathly silent. However, everyone could feel an extremely terrifying murderous aura spreading from the black-clothed man, waiting for the moment to explode. "You deserve to die." Suddenly, the black-robed man let out a low roar. Following this, he took a step forward and unleashed a saber filled with killing intent toward Zhang Wanchen. He had defeated Zhang Wanchen, but the latter had also threatened him and was still alive. This was an insult to him. The black-clothed man had to admit that he had underestimated Zhang Wanchen. But now Zhang Wanchen had to die. Zhang Wanchen's body trembled slightly. He wanted to resist, but he couldn't muster any strength. In the face of death, Zhang Wanchen showed no fear. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled up. He was actually smiling. Boom! However, at this moment, a huge force pierced through the air and slightly blocked that fatal killing aura blade. In the next instant, a figure descended and blocked Zhang Wanchen's path. Pooh! The killing aura blade pierced through the man's body. However, the man's flesh and blood blocked the attack, preventing it from inflicting too much damage on Zhang Wanchen. Brother Wu, Zhang Wanchen's eyes widened when he saw the person in front of him. The person who had appeared was one of the Sky 8 Protectors, Protector D and Kuan, Wu Yinzhou. Among the Sky 8 Protectors, the leader was Protector Tian Xian, followed by Protector D and Kuan. Tian Xian, D, and Kuan were the two strongest among the Sky 8 Protectors. Protector D and Kuan, Wu Yinzhou. Guling Wuji's expression changed when he saw Wu Yinzhou enter the arena, and he exclaimed. The protectors of Tian Xian, D, and Kuan were extremely close, like brothers. It was not strange for Wu Yinzhou to enter the arena at this moment. The crowd looked at Zhang Wanchen and Wu Yinzhou, and some could not help but whisper among themselves. Another member of the Fengtian sect. That's 2 against 1. That doesn't seem to be the rule. These two from the Fengtian sect are not simple to be able to survive the man in black space of murderous intent. Judging from the strong murderous intent from the man in black, these two won't be able to survive. The crowd looked at Zhang Wanchen and Wu Yinzhou with pity, as if they were looking at 2 dead men. Another one is here to die. I'll send you both on your way. In the sky, the man in black did not seem to mind Wu Yinzhou's appearance. His eyes flickered with a cold light as he spoke in a deep voice, like a bloodthirsty beast. We admit defeat. Wu Yinzhou supported Zhang Wanchen and said without hesitation. He knew that his strength was too weak, and he was no match for the man in black. He only wanted to save Zhang Wanchen. Now that he had saved him, there was no need to waste time. Admit defeat? The man in black let out a cold laugh and said in a cold tone, Is that even possible? In his eyes, these 2 people were already people who were bound to die. So how could they possibly survive? As soon as he spoke, the murderous intent in the space of murderous intent filled the air like a raging snowstorm. Then 2 sharp blades of murderous intent shot out and headed straight for Zhang Wanchen and Wu Yinzhou. These two blades of murderous intent were sharper than before. Once they landed, Zhang Wanxin and Wu Yinzhou would definitely die. Everyone's eyes widened as if they could already see the scene of Zhang Wanxin and Wu Yinzhou dying under the blades. Guling Wuqi and Nie Tian's eyes quivered as their nerves tightened. Their hearts were in their throats. In the blink of an eye, something strange happened. In the sky, two strange forces appeared and blocked the two blades of murderous intent. Then, a figure in gray descended like a ghost and landed next to Zhang Wanxin and Wu Yinzhou. Zhang Wanxin and Wu Yinzhou were startled at the same time, because they saw a completely unfamiliar face. The crowd was also stunned by the scene before them. They all inhaled deeply and were speechless. Who was this person? How could he easily block the two blades of murderous intent from the man in black? The terror of the man in black's strength was witnessed by everyone. Based on the performance of the man in gray, it seemed like his strength was no weaker than the man in black. Nie Tian frowned and couldn't help but look at Guling Wuqi, wanting to know the identity of the man in gray. Guling Wuqi shook his head. He didn't know who the man in gray was either. Oh, the man in black's two blades of murderous intent were blocked, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he laughed and mumbled, "Finally, someone acceptable. Tell me your name." "Feng Gui, Feng Hansu." The man in gray spoke softly. An extremely sharp aura rippled around him. It was no weaker than the man in black space of murderous intent. Chapter 45-28. Sucum Wind Demon, Feng Hansu. When the gray-robed man announced his name, everyone was stunned once again. Almost no one had heard of this name before. The Wind Demon's clan was one of the top clans in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. However, the name Feng Hansu was extremely unfamiliar. No one knew who he was. The fact that Feng Hansu was able to easily block the black-robed man's attack showed that his strength was not ordinary. Anyone who was slightly familiar with the Wind Demon's clan would know a thing or two about the strong members of the clan. However, Feng Hansu was a completely unfamiliar name. Feng Hansu. In the central viewing pavilion, Guling Wuji's face changed slightly when he heard this name, revealing a strange expression. "Senior Guling, you know this person?" Nie Tian frowned and couldn't help but ask. "Yes." Guling Wuji put away his shocked reaction and nodded slightly. A long time ago, the Wind Demon's clan produced a genius who was regarded as the hope of the Wind Demon's clan's rise. However, after that person reached the Sage Realm, the night-devouring snow cicada bloodline in his body underwent a terrifying mutation, causing the Wind Demon's clan to be extremely afraid. Originally, that person was designated as the next clan leader of the Wind Demon's clan. However, the mutation of his bloodline caused his temperament to be extremely unstable. In the end, the Wind Demon's clan had no choice but to let him leave the Wind Demon's clan. After that, that person never appeared again. His name was also regarded as a taboo by the Wind Demon's clan and was strictly forbidden from being mentioned. Feng Hansu is the genius that is regarded as a taboo? Nie Tian didn't wait for Guling Wuji to finish speaking. He had already guessed it and couldn't help but ask. "Yes." Guling Wuji nodded and said, "If nothing had happened to Feng Hansu, the Wind Demon would not have had the chance to lead the Wind Demon's clan. Back then, although the Wind Demon's talent was not bad, compared to Feng Hansu, there was still a world of difference. I really didn't expect Feng Hansu to appear again. From the looks of it, he should have solved the problem of his bloodline." As Guling Wuji spoke, he looked at Feng Hansu with a strange light in his eyes. It was obvious that he was hopeful. Feng Hansu appeared in a domineering manner and saved the two protectors, Tian Qian, Di Kuan. It was obvious that he had a friendly attitude towards the Feng Tian sect. Feng Hansu. High up in the sky, the black-clothed man was stunned at first. Then he said in a cold tone, "Are you from the Wind Demon's clan? Interesting." Mr. Feng, Zhang Wanxin, and Wu Yinzhou were very grateful to Feng Hansu, but they no longer had the strength to fight. "The two of you can step down. Leave this battle to me." Feng Hansu's eyes were cold, and his tone was as cold as ice. Yes. Zhang Wanqin and Wu Yinzhou didn't dare to say anything. They nodded and left. The black-clothed man did not stop him. His eyes were fixed on Feng Hansu. He was like a hungry wolf looking at its prey with great interest. To him, Zhang Wanqin and Wu Yinzhou were just leftovers that couldn't be brought to the table. It didn't make much of a difference whether he killed them or not. However, Feng Hansu was different. He was someone who could arouse his killing intent. It definitely couldn't let him go. You are from the Wind Demons clan. Are you going to fight on behalf of the Fengtian sect? However, at this moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out from the pavilion. The Wind Demons clan has already formed an alliance with the Fengtian sect. As an ally, I am representing the Fengtian sect to accept the battle. Is there anything wrong with that? Feng Hansu didn't even turn his head and said directly. As soon as his voice fell, the surrounding crowd instantly exploded. The Wind Demons clan actually formed an alliance with the Fengtian sect? When did this happen? I heard about it before, but both sides didn't officially admit it. I thought it was just a rumor. Is the Wind Demons clan crazy? Why would they choose to form an alliance with the Fengtian sect at this time? And this Feng Hansu, so what if he's an ally? After all, this is a battle between the Fengtian sect. Is there a need for him to stand out? The crowd discussed spiritedly. While they were surprised, they were also surprised that Feng Hansu would stand out. The alliance between the Fengtian sect and the Wind Demons was not made public, so not many people knew about it. Moreover, even if it was an alliance, there was no need for Feng Hansu to stand out. Why would he get involved in this mess? When two forces formed an alliance, it was usually for the sake of benefits. What trust was there to speak of? Especially at this time, when the Fengtian sect was facing a calamity of annihilation. If Feng Hansu stood out, wouldn't he be drawing fire to himself? Since you are an ally of the Fengtian sect, you can naturally fight. At this moment, the man in black opened his mouth. His hoarse voice was filled with a chilling smile. He said, I really want to see what the power in your body is. Make your move. Feng Hansu's face was still cold, like a wooden man. There was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. Very well, I'm getting more and more interested in you. The man in black chuckled and was actually very proud of himself. Originally, he came to kill Nyetian. He didn't expect to meet such an interesting opponent like Feng Hansu. He couldn't help but be excited. Your murderous aura makes me very uncomfortable. Feng Hansu finally frowned. He raised his hand, and an extremely thin and long sword appeared in his hand. It trembled in the air like a cicada's silk. Oh, you're going to use your real strength so soon? The man in black laughed, but there was a trace of fear in his voice. He had long sensed that there was a power in Feng Hansu's body. That kind of murderous aura made him, a person who loved to kill, feel fear. At this moment, the sword in Feng Hansu's hand clearly contained an extremely strange aura within the sword chi. It gave people the feeling that the long sword was wrapped in countless thin, sharp blades. The sharpness was enough to cut through everything. Have you heard the sound of cicadas on a snowy night? At this moment, Feng Hansu spoke again. He raised the sword in his hand, and suddenly, a layer of frost appeared in the air. Then, it turned into snowflakes. Almost in an instant, everyone suddenly realized that the entire sky beacon square was unknowingly shrouded by a cold aura. The snowflakes in the air were like falling snow. Moreover, the snowflakes were extremely realistic, as if they were real snow. However, if one observed carefully, they would find that they weren't real snowflakes. Instead, they were formed by the condensed power of a bloodline. This power you are. Almost at the same time, the man in black seemed to have sensed something. His expression suddenly changed, and his voice became frightened. It was as if he had discovered something. For the first time, the man in black showed fear. I am the shadow in the snowy night. I will bring you to listen to the sound of cicadas on a snowy night. The corner of Feng Hansu's mouth curled up, but his expression was neither sad nor happy. Especially his pair of eyes, there was not the slightest fluctuation of color. He said, 8 wind ghosts dance, bleak sorrowful wind, cold silk whispers, cicadas on a snowy night. The fastest updated August 1st Chinese website, Mew. Chapter 45:29. Ghosts of the Eight Winds dance. Chilly wind whispers. Cicadas chirp on a snowy night. Ghosts of the Eight Winds dance. Chilly wind whispers. Cicadas chirp on a snowy night. As Feng Hansu's voice trailed off, a frosty chi pervaded the air, causing the entire heaven and earth to sink into a murderous atmosphere. Everyone's expression froze, as if they were petrified. This murderous atmosphere was suffocating. Feng Hansu stood high in the sky as his body emitted a cold chi. Like a frozen mountain, he emitted a power that chilled the heaven and earth. Hiss! In the next second, a cold sound arose. It didn't sound like a cicada, it was the sound of the wind. Then, a pale white light appeared and attacked the man in black. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. The murderous space around the man in black, under the impact of the pale white light, rumbled. Then, cracks began to appear, and the space looked like it was about to collapse. It really is you. It really is you. You really walked out of that door. The man in black's murderous space was broken, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed crazily. His laughter was sharp and chilling. Nobody knew what was happening. They stared at the sky in a daze, not wanting to miss out on anything important. Wretch! In the next second, the pale white light howled and pierced through the man in black. Bang! The man in black's body trembled slightly. After a loud explosion, he exploded in the air. The murderous space crumbled and disappeared in the air. At the same time, Feng Hansu's chi disappeared as well. He stood alone in the sky, his gray robe fluttering in the wind. His demeanor was out of this world and incomparably arrogant. The wind was as sharp as a knife. The heaven and earth returned to silence. However, the murderous atmosphere in the air didn't dissipate for a long time. It was a long while later before everyone finally reacted. They inhaled a breath of cold air in unison. They looked at the gray, closed man in the distant sky and did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. Everyone had personally witnessed the man in black's capabilities. One move to kill banner leader Fan Zhong, one move to injure Tianqian Protector Zhang Wanshun, and one move to injure Protector Di and Kuan Protector Wu Lianzhou. The man in black's battle record shocked everyone. However, in front of Feng Hansu, the black-clothed man did not even have the chance to attack. He was instantly killed by Feng Hansu. This was too shocking. Who would have thought that there would be such a terrifying expert in the Wind Demons clan? Feng Hansu, the taboo of the Wind Ghost, you really live up to your reputation. In the central pavilion, Guling Wuji finally regained his senses. His cloudy eyes trembled slightly, and the shock in his heart was written all over his face. He didn't know much about Feng Hansu and had only heard of his name. To be honest, when Feng Hansu announced his name, Guling Wuji only felt that the former had the strength of a pair of men in black. Even though Feng Hansu was known as a taboo, he shouldn't be this terrifying. The strength that Feng Hansu displayed had already far exceeded the imagination of everyone present, and it had even subverted the understanding of many people of the martial Tao. At this moment, Nie Tian was also quite shocked. He had seen many true peak experts, but the strength that Feng Hansu displayed still shocked him. Previously, Nie Tian had seen the 8 Ghost Wind dance from the younger generation of the Wind Demons clan. However, the power that those people displayed was simply worlds apart when compared to Feng Hansu. The 8 Ghost Wind dance was an ancient primitive martial technique. However, when it was used by Feng Kuan and Feng Li, it was obvious that the true power of the martial technique was not displayed. However, when it was used by Feng Hansu, it truly showed how terrifying the 8 Ghost Wind dance was. It was the same bloodline power, the same 8 Ghost Wind dance, but Feng Hansu gave off a completely different feeling of deterrence and power. Nie Tian even had a feeling that Feng Hansu was strong enough to fight against those peak experts. After all, Feng Hansu did not reveal the true limits of his strength. So it's a borrowed body. High up in the sky, Feng Hansu's lips twitched as he spoke faintly. At the same time, his face became much paler, as if he had suffered some sort of injury. He had already guessed the identity of the black-clothed man. Moreover, The one he had just killed was not the real black-clothed man. It was merely a borrowed body of the black-clothed man. Merely a borrowed body already possessed such strength. The strength of the black-clothed man's original body could be seen at a glance. Lord Beacon Emperor. Then, Feng Hansu turned around and looked at the central pavilion. His gaze fell upon Nie Tian, and he bowed slightly in a very respectful manner. Nie Tian immediately walked out and also bowed with a smile. He said, "Thank you, Senior Feng, for your help. On behalf of the Feng Tian sect, I thank you, Senior. Lord Beacon Emperor, I have a chronic illness and cannot fight anymore. Please forgive me." Feng Hansa did not hide anything and said directly. Nie Tian's expression stiffened. He was startled, but he still said, "Senior Feng, you are being too polite. It is the Feng Tian sect's honor to fight for the Feng Tian sect. How could I ask for more?" Actually, Nie Tian did not expect Feng Hansu to only fight one battle. He even thought that with Feng Hansu here, the Feng Tian sect would be invincible. However, he could also see that Feng Hansu's expression did not look right, as if he was injured. But he did not expect Feng Hansu to directly say that he could not ask for more. "Thank you, Lord Beacon Emperor. I will take my leave." Feng Hansu did not give Nie Tian any time to think. He nodded slightly and left in a flash. Nie Tian stared at the spot where Feng Hansu disappeared. His expression was a little stiff and his heart was filled with bitterness. No matter how strong Feng Hansu was, it was still his own strength. He had already done his duty as an ally by appearing for the Feng Tian sect. The Feng Tian sect should not ask for more. Guling Wuji came to Nie Tian's side. The bitterness on his face was even more obvious than Nie Tian's. From his point of view, Feng Hansu's appearance was not just to help the Feng Tian sect. There must be a deeper meaning behind it. Firstly, Feng Hansu's appearance showed the Wind Demon's clan's strength to the world. If the Feng Tian sect were to be destroyed in the future, no one would easily attack the Wind Demon's clan. Secondly, as an ally, Feng Hansu's appearance was something he should do. However, he did not continue to fight. He probably felt that if the Feng Tian sect had to rely on an outsider, what was the point of being an ally? With these 2 points, Feng Hansu's appearance was much more reasonable. However, Feng Hansu had come and gone. Although he had solved the urgent problem of the Feng Tian sect, he had not resolved the serious situation. Up until now, the Feng Tian sect had sent out 5 people to fight. Shen Yunhe, Fan Zhong, Zhang Wanshun, Wu Lianzhou, and Feng Hansu. 2 had died, 2 were injured, and 1 had left. As for the oppressive side, only Yin Tong and the man in black had fought. There were still 7 people who could fight. The most troublesome thing was that the Feng Tian sect had no one left to fight. Guling Wuji and Nie Tian were not suitable candidates to fight. Right now, the Feng Tian sect was at the end of its rope. Buzz! At this moment, a sonorous sound of a zither rang out in the distant sky. It was melodious, but it had a kind of soul-stirring and endless meaning. "It's him!" When Guling Wuji heard the sound of the zither, his eyes shone with a strange light. He was actually overjoyed. The fastest updated by Chinese Language Network, Mu. OM. Chapter 45:30. The sound of the guqin was melodious. Guling Wuji's eyes were filled with a strange light. He could not hide the surprise on his face as he looked up at the sky. Nie Tian glanced at Guling Wuji and looked up into the sky curiously. At the same time, everyone turned to look in the direction where the sound of the zither came from. A moment later, a figure in green descended with a long guqin floating in front of him. He looked like an otherworldly deity with his long robes fluttering in the wind. The green-robed figure had white hair like frost, but he didn't look old at all. His eyes shone brightly like a dragon. "It's really you." Guling Wuji could not help but exclaim in surprise when he saw the face of the elder in green. Confused, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask, "Senior Guling, who is he?" Feng Tian sect's 4 Calamity Flag Master, Wenho. Guling Wuji could not hide his excitement and said, "Senior Wenho." Nie Tian was shocked when he heard the name, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. For Calamity Flag Master, Wenho. Tian knew who he was, and he had gone to the One Clan to visit Wenho. Unfortunately, Wenho was kidnapped by the Gia sect and was later rescued by Devil's Knight. Tian did not have time to visit him. Who would have thought that Wenho would appear at this time? But wasn't Wenho seriously injured and recuperating? Why did he suddenly appear? It should be Devil's Knight who healed Senior Wenho. Tian thought for a moment and said in his heart, Devil's Knight's methods were treacherous, and it was not surprising that he could heal Wenho. Feng Tian Sect's 4 Calamity Flag Master. Wenho greets Beacon Emperor, sect leader. At this moment, Wenho had already arrived above the square. He bowed respectfully to Tian and Gu Ling Wuji, who were in the central pavilion. Senior Wenho, please get up. Tian was taken aback at first, but he quickly reacted and said, Brother Wen is too polite. Gu Ling Wuji added. When the surrounding people heard Wenho reveal his identity, their expressions instantly changed, and they couldn't help but discuss spiritedly. He's the Feng Tian Sect's 4 Calamity Flag Master Wenho. Rumor has it that he was injured in his early years and became a cripple. I truly never imagined that Wenho would actually appear at this moment. Furthermore, judging from his aura, he doesn't seem to be injured at all. It is said that among the Feng Tian Sect's 4 banner leaders, Wenho, the 4th Tribulation banner leader, is the strongest. It seems that this person's aura is indeed much stronger than the previous 2 banner leaders. Everyone discussed in low voices, and their expressions slowly changed. It seemed that the following battle would be very interesting. Wenho looked at Tian and Gu Ling Wuji and nodded slightly. Then he swept his gaze across the surrounding pavilions and said in a loud voice, I represent the Feng Tian sect to meet the heroes of the world. I hope everyone will not be stingy with your teachings. Buzz. As soon as he finished speaking, the melodious sound of a zither rang out, and it shot straight into the clouds. It actually possessed the power to pierce through the clouds and crack rocks, and it seemed as if it wanted to split the heavens and the earth apart. It was obvious that Wenho wanted to intimidate everyone with the sound of the zither. Everyone's ears were filled with the sound of the zither from high up in the sky, and their eyes were filled with shock. Nobody expected Wenho to be this powerful. In terms of aura alone, Wenho's current performance was no weaker than the assassin in black from before. I didn't expect Senior Wenho's aura to be this powerful. How rare. Tian could not help but exclaim as he sensed the aura of the zither coming from the void. To be honest, he was a little worried when Wenho first appeared. However, it seemed that his worries were unnecessary now. Tian secretly guessed that Wenho's strength was probably no weaker than Lung Shuang Wuchen. When Brother Wen was young, he was already one of the top powerhouses in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. Although he was injured a long time ago, his cultivation level did not drop at all. In fact, he even improved quite a bit. Gu Ling Wuji faintly smiled and said, Furthermore, the zither of 4 calamities of 4 senses in Brother Wen's hand is the One Clan's treasure. It is rumored to be an ancient demonic zither. Demonic zither? Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, feeling quite surprised. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, Rumor has it that the One Clan's sword technique of 4 calamities of 4 senses was comprehended by the ancestor of the One Clan from the zither of 4 calamities of 4 senses. However, the zither of 4 senses of 4 calamities of 4 senses is extremely demonic. The only person in the One Clan who can control this zither is Wenho. I see. Tian's eyes dimmed, and he nodded. Perhaps Wenho's strength had not reached its peak yet, but the zither of 4 senses of 4 calamities of 4 senses had greatly improved him, making his aura far stronger than powerhouses of the same level. Wenho's words were met with silence. No one responded for a long time. Everyone could feel Wenho's determination and his strength. Who would dare to accept the challenge? Everyone. If no one accepts the challenge, then the challenge will end here. Wenho's gaze was sharp as he glanced across the crowd. There was a hint of dominance in his calmness. Rumor has it that the zither of 4 calamities of 4 senses is an ancient demonic zither. I wonder if that's true? Just as his voice trailed off, a voice arose. Then a wave of chi shot up into the sky. It was a man in green. He had a handsome appearance and was standing straight like a sword. The rumor about the magical zither is just a rumor. Wen-ho looked at the newcomer and couldn't help but ask, "May I ask for your name?" The man in green looked very young, but his chi was as deep as the ocean, giving others the feeling that it was endless. "The holy religious cult, Yongmu." Yongmu answered. Though he was very young, he already had the demeanor of a great master. As soon as his words fell, it immediately caused a discussion among the crowd. He's from the holy religious cult. No wonder he has such strength at such a young age. The holy religious cult has been hiding from the world for a long time. I didn't think they would show up at this year's selection. This person is not weak. I wonder what his identity is in the holy religious cult. Everyone discussed. They were curious and expectant at the same time. Although the holy religious cult had been hiding from the world for a long time, its name had never weakened in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. Even now, it was still the #1 sect in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. Since Yongmu was from the holy religious cult, and he dared to take the initiative to show up, it was enough to show that his strength was not to be underestimated. The holy religious cult again. Nie Tian looked at Yongmu with a gloomy expression. He had already seen the 3rd deputy of the holy religious cult, Xiaoyang. Now, another expert from the holy religious cult had appeared. The holy religious cult, which had been hiding from the world for a long time, had been making frequent movements recently. It was very likely that the person behind the holy religious cult and Fang Jin was the same person. So it's an expert from the holy religious cult. Let me learn from you. Up in the sky, Wen-ho's expression sank. The 4 calamities zither of 4 senses floated in front of him. The strings of the zither moved on their own without being plucked. The sound of the zither resounded, causing the surrounding space to be affected by the sound. Very good. Yongmu felt the fluctuation in the air. The corner of his mouth curled up into an evil smile. A black heavy sword appeared in his hand as he said indifferently, "Let me see how powerful this ancient magical zither is in your hands." Chapter 45:31. Yongmu stood coldly in the sky with a black heavy sword in his hand. The sword chi was majestic, and the momentum of the sword was like a surging river, endless and surging without end. The heavy sword was not skillful, and great skill seemed clumsy. The heavy sword in Yongmu's hand abandoned the sharpness of the sword and suppressed everything with its majestic momentum. The heavy sword in your hand is extraordinary. Wen-ho's eyes darkened as he noticed the extraordinary momentum of the black heavy sword. Brother One, you're a famous senior in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. Your strength is naturally top-notch. With the help of the magic zither, you won't be at a disadvantage even if you fight against those experts from top-notch sacred worlds. The corner of Yongmu's lips curled up coldly. His handsome face looked sinister as he said, "How would I dare to challenge you if I didn't have some special tricks up my sleeve? Come on." Wen-ho's expression was cold and solemn. He did not say anything else and waved the 4 calamities zither in the air. The strings were plucked, and the sound of the zither was like a raging wave, stirring the void and causing it to tremble. A tremendous force surged out and directly pressed down on Yongmu. Yongmu was not afraid. He slashed the black heavy sword in the air, and the momentum of the sword was red, directly breaking through the zither wave. It was obvious that the two were very careful in their first fight. They were just testing each other. The crowd looked at the 2 figures with sparkling eyes. They were all in high spirits. The strongest flag bearer of the Fengtian sect against the mysterious expert of the sacred religious cult. This is going to be interesting. Wen-ho is indeed an expert of the older generation. His attacks are steady. I think he hasn't used the true power of the magic zither yet. The black sword in that guy's hand is not simple either. He dares to go against the ancient magic zither head-on. It's probably a demonic sword too. The crowd discussed as their eyes burned even more. They were looking forward to the battle. Senior Guling, the demonic chi in Senior Wen-ho's zither is very strong. Will he be all right? Nie Tian could tell that the 4 calamities zither of 4 calamities zither was not to be underestimated. Although it had not revealed its true power, the demonic chi that it emitted was enough to surprise him. Don't worry. Flag Bearer, one has always used the Four Calamities Zither of Four Calamities Zither as his weapon. Naturally, you will be able to control it. Guling Wuji smiled faintly. He seemed to have full confidence in Wenho. While the demonic aura of the Four Calamities of Four Senses was extremely heavy, the Wen clan possessed a unique bloodline power that allowed them to resist and control the demonic aura of the magic Zither to a certain extent. Otherwise, Wenho would not have dared to use the magic Zither no matter how powerful he was. Nietian frowned and didn't say anything else, but he was still worried. He sensed that the devil chi of the Four Tribulation Zither of Four Senses was even more terrifying than the devil's sealing spear and the ghost restraining saber of the Abyss race. With Wenho's strength, could he really control the Four Senses, Four Calamities Zither? Boom! At this moment, a terrifying rumble came from the sky. Yang Mu slashed down with his sword. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, and the sword chi that was as vast as the night pressed down. It actually sealed the space around Wenho for tens of thousands of meters. Wenho plucked the strings of the magic zither, and the sound of the zither turned into thousands of sharp blades, tearing apart the gigantic sword shadows. However, the horrifying sword chi in the sword shadow was split into many sharp blades and pressed over from all directions. Oh no! Wenho's expression darkened as he sensed the ferocious aura coming at him. He crossed his legs on one knee and lowered the Four Calamities of Four Senses. He played the strings with both hands, and the music turned into a shield that shrouded his entire body. Bam, bam, bam. Countless sharp blades rained down in the next instant, crashing against the shield. Although they couldn't break through the shield, Wenho was forced to retreat. This is my chance. Yang Mu smirked coldly when he saw that. The dark black heavy sword slashed down hard in the air, and three humongous sword shadows appeared, each more terrifying than the last. They pressed down on Wenho. Wenho was inside the shield, but he could still feel the terrifying pressure coming from above. He couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't expect the dark black heavy sword in Yang Mu's hand to be so terrifying. If it weren't for the dark black heavy sword, Yang Mu wouldn't have been able to break through Wenho's zither waves. Old man, are you still not going to get serious? Yang Mu's gaze was extremely cold, and his exquisite features were extremely sinister. There was no sense of beauty in him at all. Instead, he gave off an almost twisted sense of ferocity. It seemed like Yang Mu was anticipating something. Everyone looked at the scene high up in the sky, looking rather stunned. They had initially thought that Wenho's abilities would be stronger than Yang Mu's, especially since the former had the advantage of the ancient magic zither. However, why was it that Yang Mu had forced Wenho into a corner? Senior Wenho seems to be wary of the magic zither and doesn't dare to use it as he pleases. Nietian thought to himself as he saw the reason behind it. Perhaps to others, Wenho's use of the Four Calamities Zither of Four Senses was as smooth as flowing water. However, Nietian could tell that Wenho was wary as he moved his hands. It was obvious that he was wary of something. Four Calamities Zither of Four Senses, heaven and earth as the strings. Break! Wenho bellowed at that moment, and the magic zither unleashed a boundless might. The instant the zither's music reverberated, the three sword shadows high up in the sky shattered with the sound. Yang Mu was shaken and lost his balance for a moment. He was forced to retreat dozens of meters before he managed to stabilize himself. However, Yang Mu was not surprised at all, as if he had expected this to happen. The corner of his lips curled into a sinister smile as he glared at Wenho and said in a deep voice, "Old man, are you finally willing to unleash the power of the magic zither? What's going on?" Everyone looked at Yang Mu in shock, unsure of what had happened. Judging from what Yang Mu said, Wenho had not unleashed the power of the Four Calamities Zither of Four Senses at all. "Who are you? Why are you so familiar with the Four Calamities Zither?" Wenho's expression was cold as he asked in a low voice, "Old man, have you really forgotten about this saber and its owner?" Yang Mu's eyes were bloodshot and murderous. He raised the dark, heavy sword in his hand, and a terrifying demonic aura arose, forming the shape of a saber. A saber? Wen Ho's expression changed, and he was rather shocked. The dark, heavy sword in Yangmu's hand was not a sword, but a saber. That's a saber? Everyone was shocked as well. They stared at Yangmu and the heavy saber in his hand in confusion. Who would have thought that the demonic weapon with the shape of a sword was actually a saber? This saber is... At that moment, Wen Ho seemed to have thought of something. His eyes narrowed in shock, and he paused for a moment before saying, "The heavenly demon Luo." The heavenly demon Luo was an ancient demonic saber. It was a demonic weapon made from the same materials as the four calamities zither of four senses, and it was said to have the power of the heavenly demon. It was said that several other demonic weapons were made at the same time as the demonic saber and the zither, but they were long gone. You finally remembered. The demonic aura around Yangmu's lips was sharp. The heavenly demon Luo slashed through the air, and the saber aura was unstoppable, as if it was going to tear heaven and earth apart. You have the heavenly demon Luo. Who is Blade Demon Roten to you? Wen Ho's expression changed again, and he asked in shock, "I can't believe you still remember your uncle." Yangmu's eyes trembled when he heard Blade Demon Roten's name. His murderous intent intensified, and he growled, "Then do you remember that he's your sworn brother? Do you remember the moment you killed your sworn brother with your own hands?" Chapter 45:32. Yangmu's eyes glowed red. It was the flame of his thirst for vengeance. "Roten is your uncle?" Wen Ho's expression changed when he heard Yangmu's words. He gasped in shock and froze on the spot. Just as Yangmu said, the Blade Demon Roten was his sworn brother, and he was the one who killed him. However, Yangmu only saw the final outcome. He did not know the process or the truth. Treacherous and treacherous people like you. What right do you have to live? Yangmu's hatred grew after seeing Wen Ho frozen on the spot. With a roar, the heavenly demonic Luo sliced through the air, creating a dark blade aura. Boom! In the next instant, a huge shadow of the blade appeared. It was powerful and oppressive as it headed towards Wen Ho. Wen Ho suddenly felt a heavy pressure coming from the air. His expression changed as he flipped the zither of four disasters of senses in the air. Music rolled out, but he was still one step too late. Bang! A muffled sound was heard in the air. Wen Ho's body was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Wen Ho barely managed to stabilize himself. There was a horrifying wound from his right shoulder to his chest. Blood flowed endlessly, making him look like he was bathing in a fountain of blood. "You deserve to die." Yangmu did not give Wen Ho a chance to speak. His thunderous roar was heard as the heavenly demonic Luo sliced through the air again. The shadow of the blade was like a mountain slashing down diagonally. The rumbling momentum seemed like it was going to shatter everything before it. At that moment, Yangmu finally unleashed the true power of the heavenly demonic Luo. The momentum of the blade was like a tidal wave, threatening to devour everything as it surged. Wen Ho's eyes trembled. The zither of four disasters of senses floated in the air. His fingers plucked the strings like rain, and music continued to spread, causing the air to tremble. Similarly, Wen Ho did not dare to hold back anymore. He directly activated the demonic ability of the magic zither. Boom, boom, boom. Up in the air, the will of the blade and the sound of the zither continued to clash. Terrifying power rolled in all directions, and the world fell into chaos. At the same time, two similar yet different demonic auras spread in the air. In the blink of an eye, they covered the entire sky beacon square. Everyone looked at the violent scene in the sky, and their expressions slowly froze. Although they already knew that Wen Ho and Yangmu were both top experts, they did not expect their battle to be so fierce. This was especially so for Yangmu. He was so young, yet he was able to unleash such power. Not only was he not defeated by Wen Ho, but he even directly suppressed Wen Ho. What's going on? In the central pavilion, Guling Wuji was confused and worried at the same time. He said, Brother One seems to know this guy called Yongmu. Are they related? The devil saber in Yongmu's hand has a very similar devil chi to the four calamities zither of four senses. It should also be an ancient devil weapon. Tian frowned and guessed. Senior Wenho must have been suppressed by that demonic blade. Guling Wuchi and Tian did not hear the conversation between Yongmu and Wenho, so they were very confused about the current situation. However, both of them saw that Wenho was distracted for a moment, which allowed Yongmu to take the initiative. However, Wenho was a seasoned warrior after all. Although he was being suppressed by Yongmu, he didn't show any signs of losing. However, Tian was very worried. Wenho was using the four calamities of four senses and a zither of four calamities of four senses without regard for anything else. It was likely that the demonic zither would backfire on him. Bang! Just at this moment, a muffled explosion resounded high up in the sky. Endless wild waves exploded. Amidst the surging waves, two figures soared into the sky. It was Wenho and Yongmu. Wenho stood there, bathed in blood. His entire body was suffused with a bloody aura. He looked like he was heavily injured, but his aura did not weaken in the slightest. Instead, it was even stronger than before. On the other hand, although Yongmu was not injured, he seemed to be out of breath. Although he was trying his best to hide it, it could be seen that he was panting heavily. It was obvious that Yongmu's energy was being consumed too quickly and was showing signs of exhaustion. Yongmu, with your current strength, you still can't control the heavenly demon Luo. Stop stubbornly resisting. Wenho frowned as he spoke in a low voice, and he actually spoke in a lecturing tone. As the user of the magic zither, Wenho knew better than anyone else the demonic energy within the demonic weapon was extremely oppressive to the user. Even he would not have dared to activate the four calamities zither of four senses unless it was absolutely necessary. However, Yongmu did not care about anything else at this moment. He even used the power of his bloodline to activate the heavenly demon Luo, which was why his energy was being consumed so quickly. What was more troublesome was that if Yongmu were to continue, it was highly likely that he would be devoured by the demonic blade. In the best-case scenario, he would go berserk. In the worst-case scenario, he would lose his reputation on the spot. Wenho killed Roten, but he did not want to see his sworn brothers descend and die a horrible death in front of him. Old thing, put away your pretentious act. Yongmu did not appreciate it at all. Instead, the murderous intent in his eyes intensified as he growled, "Today I, Yongmu, will avenge my uncle. Heavenly demon Luo, divine punishment." In the next moment, Yongmu once again raised the heavenly demon Luo in his hand. His hands continued to release the aura of his bloodline into the heavenly demon Luo, activating even more demonic energy within the demonic blade. Virum! Instantly, the demonic blade trembled in the air and let out a low hum. Instantly, the will of the blade shot up into the sky, and demonic aura filled the air like an ocean. Die! Yongmu slashed down with his blade. The blade left behind a ray of light in the air. The shadow of the blade was like a collapsing pillar. Boundless blade, chi pressed down and sealed off the space within a radius of hundreds of thousands of meters. It was obvious that Yongmu had made up his mind to kill Wenho and avenge his uncle. Why are you doing this? Wenho stared at the horrifying shadow of the blade descending from the sky. His eyes trembled slightly, and there was a hint of moisture in his murky eyes. Could it be that he was forced to kill his sworn brother? Heaven and earth are silent. Four calamities, Yin and Yang break. In the next moment, Wenho closed his eyes and plucked the strings of his zither. He spoke calmly without any emotion. Virum! The sound of the zither suddenly rang out. A wave of zither appeared in the air. At first, it was very thin, but in an instant, it expanded. Like a layer of water, it spread out in the air. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the shocking water wave, and they were extremely shocked. The next moment, an even more shocking scene happened. The zither wave water curtain spread out with a crash. Everywhere it passed, it was as easy as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The enormous blade image was actually neatly sliced into two by the water curtain. Bang! Bang! In the next second, the two halves of the blade shook in the air and shattered into countless blade chi that dissipated. Almost at the same time, the water wave also shook in the air and then disappeared. Bang! Yangmu was stunned by the scene in front of him, but at this moment his body shook inexplicably. A clear and cold sound of a zither floated past his ears, and then several bloody wounds appeared on his body. His whole body was directly sent flying, leaving a horrifying trail of blood in the air. Chapter 45:33. High up in the sky above the sky beacon square, the wind and clouds were cold and silent. Countless pairs of eyes were focused on two figures standing, bathed in blood. It was Wenho and Yangmu. Yangmu's aura was raging. His frail body was like a broken leaf in a storm, swaying as if he would fall at any moment. However, his eyes were still cold and murderous. Like a pair of sharp blades, he glared at Wenho. Only bone-deep hatred could create such a murderous look in his eyes. Yangmu, are you all right? Wenho felt the murderous intent coming at him, but he could not care less about his injuries and asked almost instinctively. When he found out about Yangmu's identity, he no longer wanted to fight the latter. However, Yangmu pressured him too much, and he had no choice but to fight, resulting in the current situation. Wenho felt that he owed his sworn brother, the Blade Demon Roten. As such, he did not want things to go to extremes when facing Yangmu. However, Yangmu pressured him so much that he had no choice but to fight back. If it were not for the Fengtian sect, Wenho would rather die in the hands of Yangmu in today's battle. Hypocrite! Hearing Wenho's concern, the hatred in Yangmu's eyes intensified. He growled like a beast. Then his body swayed and he fell straight down. Yangmu, seeing this, Wenho's expression changed. He moved and caught Yangmu. What's going on? Everyone was stunned by the scene in the sky. They all looked at Wenho and Yangmu in confusion. It was supposed to be a battle of life and death. How did Wenho win and catch Yangmu instead? Senior Wenho. At that moment, Tian had already arrived beside Wenho. He sensed that the latter's breathing was a little unstable. He asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Lord Beacon Emperor, please take a look at Yangmu's condition." Wenho's breathing was a little chaotic under the pressure of the magic zither, but he ignored his own safety and spoke in a hurry. Tian confirmed that Wenho was not in great danger, and he could tell that Wenho was indeed very worried about Yangmu. He nodded, and then directly sent a stream of life force into Yangmu's body, temporarily stabilizing his heart meridian and breathing. Both Yangmu and Wenho had given it their all in the previous battle, but Wenho's control over the magic zither was clearly stronger than Yangmu's control over the magic saber. Furthermore, Wenho's strength was much stronger than Yangmu's, so Yangmu's injuries were more severe. Coupled with the pressure of the demonic saber's backlash, his life was in danger. If it wasn't for Tian protecting Yangmu's heart meridian with his 10th life vein, the latter would have died in the blink of an eye. Beacon Emperor, how is he? Wenho had already sensed that something was wrong with Yangmu, but he still confirmed with Tian. I've already protected his heart meridian, but his hand is too heavy. There are 2 waves of demonic chi in his body that are colliding with the 100 meridians in his body. Tian furrowed his brows and solemnly said, if he can't guide these 2 demonic energies out, I'm afraid he won't be able to live past today. The 2 waves of demonic chi came from the magic zither and the magic saber. Although the magic zither and the magic saber came from the same source, they had gone through countless different owners, so the demonic chi of the 2 demonic weapons was already different. They could no longer merge as one. Fortunately, the 2 waves of demonic chi could not merge. Otherwise, Yangmu would have been a corpse by now. Sir Beacon Emperor, please save him. Wenho's expression changed when he heard Tian's words. He then went down on one knee and begged in a hurry. Please get up, sir. Tian did not expect Wenho to do that. He quickly helped the latter up and said, I'll save him. Thank you, Sir Beacon Emperor. Wenho got up slowly. His eyes were clearly moist. Tian felt a little strange. Who exactly was Yang Mu for Wen Ho to do this? You're too kind, sir. Tian said nothing more and left with Yang Mu. Tian could not have done alone if he wanted to guide the two waves of demonic qi. He needed Guling Wuji's help. Second brother, long time no see. As soon as Tian left, a deep and cold voice came from behind Wen Ho. It was filled with strong, murderous intent. Xia Yunbei. Wen Ho's eyes narrowed when he heard this voice. He turned around and saw an extremely familiar face. It was his and Roten's sworn brother, Xia Yunbei. Back then, Wen Ho, Roten, and Xia Yunbei had become sworn brothers. Roten was the eldest brother, Wen Ho was the second brother, and Xia Yunbei was the third brother. However, after that, the three of them had gone in completely different directions. Luo Tong joined the St. Grace cult and quickly became the first vice hierarch. Wen Ho entered the Fengtian sect and became the leader of the sect at a young age. Xia Yunbei entered the Gia sect and became the youngest inner elder of the Gia sect in a short period of time. At this moment, the circumstances of the three of them were even more obviously different. The blade demon Roten was already dead. Moreover, he had died at the hands of his sworn brother, Wen Ho. Wen Ho had just recovered from his injuries and appeared in a domineering manner. However, the Fengtian sect was in danger of being exterminated, so he could only stand up and fight. As for Xia Yunbei, he was the one in the best situation among the three. At this moment, he had already become the sect leader of the Gia sect. Not long ago, Wen Ho had been captured into the Gia sect. However, Xia Yunbei happened to be in seclusion, so he did not get to see him. Furthermore, the people of the Gia sect did not know that Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei were sworn brothers. Even the Fengtian sect did not know the relationship between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei. Thus, when Guling Wuji saw Xia Yunbei appear and call Wen Ho's second brother, he could not help but be stunned. When the others saw Xia Yunbei appear, their expressions all changed. Isn't he the sect leader of the Gia sect, Xia Yunbei? Why is he calling Wen Ho's second brother? That's right. This person is indeed Xia Yunbei. I heard that he has been in seclusion for some time. Why did he suddenly appear? It looks like the relationship between the Gia sect leader and the Fengtian sect's four tribulation flags master is not ordinary. This will be a good show to watch. As everyone spoke, their eyes shone brightly, and their expressions were fiery. Who would have thought that the upper echelons of the Gia sect and the Fengtian sect, who were irreconcilable enemies, actually had such a secret relationship? Xia Yunbei, you have finally appeared. Wen Ho looked at the person he was most familiar with, but there was no warmth in his eyes. Instead, they were filled with coldness and anger. Xia Yunbei was once the person he was most familiar with, the person he trusted the most, and the person closest to him. However, now, he had become the person he hated the most and did not want to see the most. Second brother, you and I are brothers. Why do you look at me like you are an enemy? The corners of Xia Yunbei's mouth twitched. He smiled coldly and said, Could it be that you want to kill me like you killed Big Brother? I want the truth. Wen Ho said in a deep voice. His aura was concealed, and he was like a beast in a cage. The truth? Xia Yunbei smiled again and asked in return, What truth? The truth that Big Brother has become a demon. Wen Ho's voice was like thunder as he stared at Xia Yunbei. He said angrily, Xia Yunbei, do you think that I have done nothing all these years when I was crippled? Or do you think that the things you did back then can never be known? Chapter 45-34. Wen Ho questioned Xia Yunbei face to face, no longer having any misgivings in his heart. The little bit of affection he had for Xia Yunbei as sworn brothers had long since disappeared along with Xia Yunbei's ruthlessness. In Wen Ho's opinion, all his grudges and everything would be settled today. Back then, when he had sworn brotherhood with Roten and Xia Yunbei, he had thought that the three brothers could support each other and reach the peak together. However, he had not expected that everything would be destroyed when Roten joined the demonic Tao. Yang Mu had sought revenge on Wen Ho, but the latter had no intention of arguing with him. After all, he had indeed killed Roten. However, the one he had killed was Roten, who had joined the demonic Tao. Roten had been a peak bladesman in the seventh cultivator of true virtue's sacred world. It was very likely that he would become the #1 bladesman. Furthermore, Roten was a loyal and sincere person. He was a trustworthy and dependable elder brother. Unfortunately, after joining the demonic Tao, Roten had gone to the extreme. He could not control his murderous nature and killed the innocent. Tens of thousands of souls had died under his saber. Wen-Ho had wanted to stop Roten, but in the end, it had led to a confrontation between the two. In the end, Roten had died in battle, while Wen-Ho had been severely injured. Second brother, thank you very much. As Wen-Ho thought about everything that had happened, the words that Roten had said to him with great difficulty before he died echoed in his mind. When Roten had regained consciousness, he had not blamed Wen-Ho. Instead, he had thanked him. Thus, Wen-Ho did not regret what he had done, as he knew that he had done the right thing. The last words that Roten had said to Wen-Ho before he died were words that Wen-Ho would remember forever. Beware of Xia Yunbei. Wen-Ho could not believe that his elder brother would say such words before he died. If he had not been certain that Roten had been awake at the time, Wen-Ho would have thought that Roten had lost consciousness and was just speaking nonsense. It was because of Roten's reminder that Wen-Ho had secretly investigated Xia Yunbei. Although Wen-Ho had not found out the whole truth, he was very sure that Xia Yunbei had been the one who had planned Roten joining the demonic Tao back then. He simply did not dare to believe that his sworn brother was actually the culprit who framed his sworn brother. Although Wen-Ho already knew the truth, he was already half crippled, and Xia Yunbei's position in Gia sect was becoming more and more prominent. In the end, for the sake of the Fengtian sect and the One family, Wen-Ho buried his years of hatred in his heart. But today, Xia Yunbei had taken the initiative to appear in front of him. How could he not ask for an explanation? Second brother, it seems that I have underestimated you. I never thought that a half-cripple like you would actually be able to stand up one day. Facing this question, Xia Yunbei did not panic at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "It looks like you've investigated many things while you were crippled. Xia Yunbei, was Big Brother becoming a demonic cultivator really your doing?" Wen-Ho's gaze was as sharp as a blade as he growled. "So what if I am?" Xia Yunbei smiled again and said, "Could it be that you want to oppose me, your sworn brother, for the sake of that dead person? Big Brother treats you well. Why did you harm him?" Wen-Ho's eyes trembled. He could not believe that this person, who was cold to the bone, was once his sworn brother. "That's right. You all treat me well. Unfortunately, you can't give me what I want." Xia Yunbei smiled, but it made people shudder. He said in a deep voice, "Then I can only use your lives to exchange for what I want." "What do you mean?" Wen-Ho's eyes burned like fire. He growled, "Someone ordered you to do this, right? Wen-Ho, if you really want to know the truth, then defeat me." Suddenly, Xia Yunbei stopped smiling. His expression changed as he spoke in a deep voice. After saying that, Xia Yunbei released a powerful aura. It was like layers of mist surrounding his body. It was extremely strange. "In-water curse." Wen-Ho's eyes trembled. He said in shock, "You really practice this evil technique?" "Humph." Xia Yunbei smiled coldly and said, "You saw it clearly. Back then, Roten became a demonic cultivator because he was struck by my in-water curse. You deserve to die." Wen-Ho knew that Xia Yunbei was purposely angering him, but he still could not suppress his anger. With a low roar, the four calamities zither of four senses moved through the air. Zither waves surged, filling the sky like sand, directly pressing down on Xia Yunbei. "Very good. This is the Zither Devil, Wen-Ho I know." Xia Yunbei was not afraid of the Guqin waves. Instead, he smiled. The in-water curse around him moved slowly in the air. It seemed soft and weak, but it released a shocking power. Bang! 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 The Guqin waves were like waves hitting the shore. When they landed on the in-water curse, they all shattered. Seeing that, Wen-Ho quickly plucked the four calamities zither. The Guqin waves surged endlessly, each stronger than the last. Buzz! 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 Boom! 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 Terrifying powers kept colliding in the air. Heaven and earth shook, and the weather changed. Everyone looked at the shocking scene in the air. They were shocked and in disbelief. No one had expected that the battle between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei would turn into a battle of life and death right from the start. It was obvious that the two were fighting with strength. If one side showed weakness first, they would be met with a fatal counterattack. Oh no! Guling Wuji, who was in the observation pavilion, had an ugly expression when he saw that. He knew that things were not going well. He did not know about the grudge between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei. However, he knew that Xia Yunbei was the leader of the Gia sect and had unfathomable strength. He was one of the strongest cultivators in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. If Wen Ho was at his peak, he might have a chance to fight against Xia Yunbei. However, Wen Ho had just recovered from his illness, and his strength had not fully recovered yet. In addition, he had used up too much of his strength in the battle with Yangmu. Not only was he injured by Yangmu, but he was also injured by the Guqin. Under such circumstances, Wen Ho would definitely lose. Senior, Wen Ho has put himself in danger by fighting against the leader of the Gia sect. Nie Tian said in a deep voice. He could tell that something was wrong. I hope that brother Wen can use even more power from the Four Calamities Zither. Guling Wuji calmed down and said in a deep voice. Wen Ho could not fight against Xia Yunbei with his own strength. He could only place his hope on the Four Calamities Zither. Wen Ho, after so many years, you still can't control the Four Calamities Zither. Xia Yunbei's voice was heard. The water curse around him became violent and swept the Zither waves in the surroundings like a hurricane. If that's the case, why don't you give me the Four Calamities Zither? Xia Yunbei was extremely arrogant. As he spoke, the water curse swept the Zither waves in the air and formed a huge water curse vortex. Xia Yunbei, as long as I, Wen Ho, am still alive, don't even think about touching the Four Calamities Zither. The Zither waves around Wen Ho weakened, but his eyes were still sharp and did not dim at all. Silence of heaven and earth, earthly calamity Buddha. Then, Wen Ho let out a low roar. The Four Calamities Zither turned one round in the air, and a huge Zither wave surged out. Boom! With the magic Zither as the center, the terrifying Zither wave spread in all directions and instantly formed a 9-story pagoda. Chapter 45-35. Su coming in the sky above the sky beacon square. Boundless and violent energy kept clashing. The sky and earth rumbled and the wind and clouds surged. It looked like the end of the world. Everyone was shocked. They had never thought that the battle between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei would reach such a level. Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei might not be stronger than Feng Hansu and the Assassin in Black, but their battle was far more intense. Rumble! The water incantation vortex behind Xia Yunbei rumbled. The sound of waves came from the water incantation. Layers of terrifying airwaves surged in the sky. They tore space apart and stirred up a space-time storm. The violent aura spread in a radius of tens of thousands of meters. At the same time, the 9-floored pagoda rose behind Wen Ho like a giant that could hold up the sky. Terrifying Guqin waves surrounded his body, and a majestic aura swept through the heavens and earth. Both of them were imposing and thunderous. They were going to fight to the death. Wen Ho, you shouldn't be here, Xia Yunbei said in a deep voice in the sky. His eyes were cold and murderous. You're destined to die today. Even if I die, I'll take you with me. Wen Ho's eyes darkened. As he said that, blood chi burst out from his body. The surging aura spread and turned into bloodline runes, merging with the Four Calamities Zither of four senses. Xia Yunbei frowned when he saw that, but he was not moved. He said indifferently, Wen Ho, do you think you can activate the power of the Four Calamities Zither of four senses with your bloodline power? His cold voice was full of mockery. Xia Yunbei's eyes were cold and arrogant. In his opinion, the Four Calamities Zither of four senses was a waste in Wen Ho's hands because Wen Ho did not understand the true secrets of the Zither. Xia Yunbei, I'll make you pay for what you did in the past with your blood today. Wen Ho's eyes were bloodshot. He roared, and the blood chi around him became even more violent. Bloodline runes flowed into the Zither continuously, triggering the surrounding airwaves. The airwaves soared into the sky and shook everything. Bring it on. However, Xia Yunbei's lips curled up into a cold smile. He seemed extremely confident and fearless. Boom! When Ho no longer hesitated, the 9-layer pagoda behind him suddenly moved. It was like a huge mountain pressing down on Xia Yunbei amidst the boundless zither waves. Bang! Xia Yunbei was arrogant and fearless. The water curse around him spread out layer by layer. It looked weak, but it contained a terrifying power. The instant the 9-layered pagoda collided, there was a deafening explosion. Buzz! Instantly, at the center of the collision, an endless amount of energy spread out in all directions. The majestic energy swept everything in its path. In the surrounding pavilions, everyone could feel the terrifying impact coming from high up in the sky, and they all circulated their yuan meridians to resist it. Some of the weaker warriors actually vomited blood under the impact of this force. Everyone looked at the chaotic scene in the sky, and their hearts were filled with shock. No one had expected the battle between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei to be this intense. One had to admit that the strength of these two people represented the peak of the 7th sacred cultivator world. It could be said to be a world-shaking battle. Guling Wuji's eyes trembled. Although he did not say anything, it was obvious that he was very worried about Wen Ho. After all, Wen Ho had not fully recovered his strength. On top of that, he was injured and had suffered the backlash of the zither. How could he endure such a bloody battle? Nie Tian, who was standing to the side, looked even more solemn. He could already tell that Wen Ho had used the power of his bloodline to activate the power of the 4 calamities zither of 4 senses. Even if he could defeat Xia Yunbei in the end, he would still suffer the backlash of his zither. No matter what, Wen Ho would not have a good ending. Turbulence surged in the sky, and waves of energy surged continuously. The 9-layer pagoda and the water curse devoured each other. Only half of the huge pagoda was left, and it was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like it would completely collapse in the next moment. On the other hand, the water curse vortex did not weaken. Instead, it was slowly becoming stronger. Wen Ho, you've lost, Xia Yunbei said in a cold voice, like the sound of a death knell. Is that so? Wen Ho smiled. His eyes were filled with determination that had never been seen before as he stared at Xia Yunbei. So many years have passed, and you're still the same. You'll never admit defeat. Xia Yunbei snickered. The water curse vortex surged, and the huge 9-layer pagoda could no longer withstand it. It shook violently in the air and crumbled. Wen Ho was not afraid at all when he saw this. Instead, his lips curled into a cold smile. What followed was an extremely shocking scene. 4 calamities, 4 senses, blood calamity. Wen Ho spread his arms and spoke calmly. Then, his body began to crumble, turning into countless blood-colored runes that merged with the zither. Wen Ho, Xia Yunbei realized something when he saw this. He cried out in shock and retreated in an attempt to escape. He never thought that Wen Ho would choose to sacrifice himself to the zither and activate its power with his own life. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Virum, the moment Wen Ho's silhouette disappeared, the 4 calamities zither of 4 senses let out a mournful wail. Then, a blood-colored blade shot out and pierced through the water curse vortex. Whoosh! Immediately, the water curse vortex split open, turning into layers of water mist and dissipating. The next moment, Xia Yunbei's chest was pierced by the blood-colored blade before he could even react. There was a fist-sized hole where his heart was. Blood gushed out and dyed his entire body red. Everyone stared at the raging waves in the sky, their expressions almost lifeless. Most people could not see what had happened, but they could sense from the raging waves how intense the battle between Wen Ho and Xia Yunbei was. And the sound of the zither just now was extremely shocking. After a long while, the raging waves in the sky dissipated, and a blood-colored silhouette appeared before everyone. It was Xia Yunbei. Xia Yunbei's body was trembling. It was obvious that he was severely injured. However, his breathing was still heavy, and he did not seem to be in any danger. Everyone's eyes were shaking. They did not expect Xia Yunbei to be so heavily injured. Then, everyone realized that Wen Ho was nowhere to be seen in the sky. Brother Wang, in the central pavilion, Guling Wuji already knew what had happened. His lips were trembling, but he could not make a sound. A shocking song, an everlasting, unyielding character. Nietan, who was beside him, had a calm expression. He did not seem to be very sad or happy. He only spoke in a deep voice. Wen Ho did not show any fear at the moment of his death. His unyielding character was everlasting. However, he did not manage to take revenge in the end. Xia Yunbei still lived. Wen Ho, no matter how smart you are, you would not have guessed that I have two hearts, right? Xia Yunbei's lips twitched as he sneered in his heart. Originally, the last sound blade that had merged with Wen Ho's life would have been enough to take Xia Yunbei's life. Unfortunately, Xia Yunbei's martial body was different from ordinary people's. He had two hearts, which was why he was able to survive. In the end, the four calamities zither of four senses still belongs to me, Xia Yunbei. Xia Yunbei's eyes trembled slightly. They were burning with passion as they locked onto the four calamities zither of four senses not far away. New by Chinese website. MUOM. Chapter 45-36. Xia Yunbei looked at the four disasters zither of four senses with unconcealable passion in his eyes. He then moved and came before the zither. He was only a few meters away from the zither at the moment. He could clearly feel the demonic energy contained in the zither, as well as the lingering power of his bloodline. The ancient demonic device, the four disasters, four senses, still belongs to me, Xia Yunbei. After all, Xia Yunbei's eyes trembled slightly. He was obviously very excited. He took a step forward and reached for the zither, only to encounter a strange scene. He was less than a few meters away from the zither, but he found it hard to move forward after taking a step forward. One of his hands was floating in the air, but he could not grab the zither no matter what. There seemed to be a strange shield surrounding the zither in the air. Not only did it prevent Xia Yunbei from getting the zither, but it also trapped him. How could this be? Xia Yunbei was quite shocked. He thought that the zither was protecting itself instinctively and that he had been trapped. You're so shameless. Not only did you kill your sworn brother, but you're also trying to steal something from him. You're so shameless. However, a mocking laugh was suddenly heard in the air in the next moment, which stunned Xia Yunbei. Who's there? Xia Yunbei came to his senses and looked around. He growled, "You're sneaking around. Come out." His angry growl shook the area, but the air was dead silent. There was no response. Xia Yunbei used his divine senses to sense the surroundings, but he could not find any unusual aura. He became alert right away, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. There was someone hiding in the air that he could not sense at all. That person could kill him at any time without making a sound. I have a friend. He told me that the more evil a person is, the more they're afraid of death. At that moment, the cold voice was heard again with a strong sense of mockery. The person chuckled and said, "Seems like he's right. Who exactly are you? What do you want?" Xia Yunbei felt a chill run down his spine. He growled. His nerves were tense, and he looked like he had gone mad. Everyone in the square and the pavilion was puzzled to see Xia Yunbei behaving like that. They did not hear anything, nor did they see anyone. It was as if Xia Yunbei was talking to the air. What's wrong with the leader of the Gia sect? Are you crazy? Could it be that Wen Ho did something before his death that caused his soul to lose control? It should be that magic zither. Perhaps there's someone hiding in the zither that's controlling the spirit of the leader of the Gia sect. Everyone was guessing as they watched the scene in the sky with great interest. They were looking forward to what would happen next. Since you want to know who I am, I will show myself. In the void, a cold voice with a hint of mockery rang out, following which an almost undetectable aura surged out, and then a thin ray of light flashed. Before Xia Yunbei could react, he suddenly felt intense pain spread through his entire body. He immediately howled miserably. He took a closer look and realized that his right arm had been completely cut off at some point in time. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. All of their gazes were focused on the black-clothed figure behind Xia Yunbei. The black-clothed figure looked a little thin and weak. His body was swaying as if he was drunk. However, there was an extremely mysterious aura around him that flowed like water, giving off an extremely fierce feeling. It was as if one would be torn into pieces as soon as they got close to him. Without a doubt, the person who had attacked Xia Yunbei earlier was this black-clothed man. In the central pavilion, Nie Tian and Guling Wuji were also stunned. They looked at the black-clothed figure, feeling that he was extremely unfamiliar. Could he be someone invited by Senior Bingji? Nie Tian's brows furrowed as he thought to himself. Before Bingji left, she had promised Nie Tian that she would find someone to replace her and help the Fengtian sect fight against the assassins from the abyss. At that time, Bingji was very determined that as long as that person was there, the assassins from the abyss would definitely not be a threat to the Fengtian sect. Perhaps this black-clothed man was that person that Bingji had mentioned. Your name is Xia Yunbei, right? Now that I've come out, do you dare to fight with me? At that moment, the black-clothed man lifted his black robe and spoke calmly, revealing a peerlessly handsome face. This face was extremely handsome. His facial features were exquisite, almost giving off a feminine feeling. Although he was a man, the vast majority of women were not as handsome as him. Who exactly are you? Xia Yunbei was extremely shocked. His face instantly became as pale as a sheet of paper, and even his voice was trembling. Although the handsome man in front of him had an indifferent expression, Xia Yunbei felt a suffocating pressure from him. He believed that if the handsome man wanted to, he could definitely kill him in an instant. I'm now representing the Fengtian sect to accept your challenge. Do you still want to fight? The black-clothed man smiled calmly. He raised his slender arm in the air, and the four calamities zither of four senses moved with the force and landed in front of him. You? Xia Yunbei's eyes trembled. He could not help but take a few steps back. He almost could not stand. Could it be that the four calamities zither of four senses that he had risked his life to obtain was going to be handed over to someone else just like that? The crowd below was also dumbfounded. No one expected such a dramatic scene to happen. The black-clothed man's strength was unfathomable. He claimed to be representing the Fengtian sect to accept the challenge. Could he be from the Fengtian sect? Whoosh! At that moment, the black-clothed man began to play the zither. A completely different sound was heard. It was like flowing water, endless and endless. How is this possible? Xia Yunbei was dumbfounded when he saw that. His face was filled with shock. The four calamities zither of four senses was an ancient magic zither. Even the one family, which had a bloodline suppression toward the magic zither, only Wen Ho alone could control it, let alone ordinary people. Where did this black-clothed man come from? How could he play the magic zither so casually? Looks like the rumors are true. This magic zither really does contain the initial primordial force. The black-clothed man looked at the magic zither in his hand and listened to the music. He could not help but frown and twitch his lips. How did you know? Xia Yunbei's expression changed again when he heard the black-clothed man mention the initial primordial force. He screamed in shock. The black-clothed man chuckled, but did not answer him. He then turned to look at Nie Tian in the distance and said loudly, "Nie, I'll leave the magic zither to you." As he spoke, he tossed the four calamities zither of four senses at him. Nie Tian moved and caught the magic zither. He steadied himself and bowed at the black-clothed man. He said respectfully, "Thank you, Senior. How should I address you?" The crowd was stunned to hear Nie Tian's words. They did not expect him to not know who the black-clothed man was. "I'm Hua Qiqiao. An old friend asked me to come and see you." The black-clothed man said with a faint smile. "Senior Bingji asked you to come?" Nie Tian blurted out as his eyes quivered. He had guessed that the black-clothed man was most likely someone Bingji asked to come. It seemed like he was right. In Feng Hua. Chapter 45-37. In Feng Thanata. Hearing this incomparably familiar name, Nie Tian could not help but be stunned for a moment. Then his expression changed, as if he thought of something. The newcomer's name was Hua Qiqiao. He was sent by Yin Fengwu to find Nie Tian, and his power was so strong that he was not weaker than Yin Fengwu. His identity was obvious: Supreme Hua, one of the four great evil lords of the Ghost Clan. The wind, flower, snow, moon, four great evil lords were obviously related to his name. Yin Fengwu was Supreme Wind, Shi Yue Hua was Supreme Moon, and Hua Qiqiao was Supreme Flower. Nie Tian, you should have guessed my identity, right? Hua Qiqiao looked at Nie Tian and laughed. Thank you, Supreme Flower. Nie Tian smiled and bowed to express his gratitude. You are indeed, as Old Feng said. You are extremely talented and have top-notch aptitude. No wonder you can break his sword formation. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly as he acknowledged his identity. He did not hide his admiration for Nie Tian at all. You flatter me, Supreme Flower. Nie Tian chuckled with an indifferent expression. All right, step back and watch the battle. Leave the rest to me. Hua Qiqiao said no more and signaled Nie Tian to leave. Nie Tian agreed and returned to the central pavilion. Nie Tian, who is this Supreme Flower? Guling Wuji could not help but ask when he saw that Nie Tian seemed to have a close relationship with Hua Qiqiao, the four great evil sovereigns of the ghost race. Nie Tian smiled faintly and briefly explained Hua Qiqiao's identity. I didn't expect the four great evil lords of the Ghost Clan to actually exist. Guling Wuji was shocked and couldn't help but exclaim. Long ago, he had heard that the ghost race had four supreme masters, known as the four great evil lords. Every one of them was no weaker than the Lord of all ghosts. However, most people thought that this was a rumor spread by the ghost race to intimidate the other races. They didn't expect it to be true. Since Supreme Hua is one of the four great evil lords, his power should be considered top-notch. With him around, the Fengtian sect should be safe for now. Guling Wuji heaved a sigh of relief, and his expression became much more relaxed. Yes, Nie Tian nodded. His gaze swept across the four calamities zither of four senses in his hand and sighed. It's a pity that Senior Wenho. Guling Wuji let out a long sigh and did not say anything else. At this time, Hua Qiqiao's sudden appearance caused everyone to be bewildered. Who is this guy? Looking at his strength, he should be a peak expert even in the All-Heaven Saints world. This person seems to have a close relationship with the Nie Tian Beacon Emperor of the Fengtian sect. He's probably here to oversee the Fengtian sect. With this person holding the fort, I'm afraid no one will be able to shake the Fengtian sect. As they spoke, they looked at Hua Qiqiao with fear in their eyes. Everyone had a natural reverence for the strong. Aren't you going to scram? In the sky, Hua Qiqiao looked coldly at Xia Yunbei and smiled disdainfully. Xia Yunbei's face was extremely gloomy, but he did not dare to say anything. After hesitating for a very long time, he finally left hatefully. Although he had not officially clashed with Hua Qiqiao, he knew that he would definitely die if he did. Hua Qiqiao did not seem dangerous, but he was definitely not a merciful person. Any peak expert would have countless lives on their hands. Clearly, they would not care about killing one more person. At least you know what's good for you. Hua Qiqiao chuckled with a disdainful expression. Killing a shameless person like Xia Yunbei would be dirtying his hands. Everyone, is there anyone who wants to fight? Hua Qiqiao looked around and spoke loudly. His voice was filled with intense provocation. However, the entire place fell silent after he spoke. There was no response for a very long time. At this point, this was no longer a simple battle of victory. It was a battle of life and death. The Sky Phoenix sect had already lost 3 banner leaders. For the entire sect, it had reached a point where their bones and tendons were shaken. Hua Qiqiao's appearance had temporarily stabilized the situation for the Fengtian sect. However, the faces of Nie Tian and Guling Wuji didn't look relaxed at all. Nie Tian knew that the person behind Feng Jin had yet to appear. The real threat had yet to appear. If the other party was really from the Human Emperor's palace, even Hua Qiqiao might not have a chance of winning. Nie Tian was very clear about the Human Emperor's palace's strength. Even an elder could suppress Hua Qiqiao, let alone a human sovereign realm cultivator. Moreover, the Fengtian sect had already sent out 7 people, including Hua Qiqiao. At most, there were 2 more people who could fight. On the other side, there were still 5 people who had yet to fight. Senior Guling, do you know of any method that can greatly increase a person's cultivation base in a short period of time? Suddenly, Nietian looked at Guling Wuji and asked solemnly. Guling Wuji was stunned, and his heart skipped a beat. Of course, he could guess what Nietian was thinking, but he hesitated and said, high-grade sage elixirs can basically increase a martial artist's cultivation base. As for the exploding essence holy elixir, it can instantly increase a martial artist's cultivation base by 3 or 4 grades. However, the price is extremely high. If it's light, it will cause serious internal injuries. If it's heavy, it will harm the martial artist's martial arts foundation. 3 or 4 grades. Nietian's eyes darkened. He took a deep breath and said, what I want is a method that can directly increase a martial artist's cultivation base by 1 grade. Nietian, W, what are you going to do? Guling Wuji's expression changed when he heard Nietian's words. He was shocked. After martial artists reached the sage state, it was extremely difficult to increase their cultivation base. Even a rank 8 or 9 exploding essence holy elixir could only increase a few grades. If he wanted to directly raise his cultivation by a realm, it was basically impossible. Even if it was possible, it must be some kind of forbidden technique. While a martial artist could greatly increase their cultivation base, they had to pay a huge price. Nietian was currently at the first heaven awakening realm. Was he going to directly increase his strength to the first heaven martial realm? This is a battle of the Fengtian sect. As the Beacon Emperor, I can't just stand by and watch. Nietian's gaze was firm. He said seriously, there will be a battle next, and it belongs to me. This. Guling Wuji was momentarily stunned and speechless. Myriad Return Blade of the Demon Palace of Myriad Sounds. Please enlighten me, Supreme Flower of the Ghost Clan. At that moment, a deep voice sounded. Then, a burly figure appeared in the sky. He was like a mountain, and the heavens and earth trembled. Nietian and Guling Wuji's expressions changed at the same time. They looked at the burly figure. Someone from the Demon Palace of Myriad Sounds. Nietian's gaze darkened. He suddenly remembered that he had met a martial artist from the Demon Palace of Myriad Sounds during the Hidden Dragon battle. It was the young master of the Demon Palace of Myriad Sounds, Gong Yuzigi. Back then, Gong Yuzigi was ranked 4th on the Hidden Sky ranking. During the Hidden Dragon battle, he had easily defeated Jun Jianxing. His strength was extremely strange, especially his control of the power of sound waves. He had already reached the point of perfection. The person before them, called Million Returning Blade, was also from the Demon Palace of Myriad Sounds. Clearly, he was also a martial artist who could control the power of sound waves. Since he dared to accept the challenge, his strength must be extremely strong. However, it was unknown if he had the strength to fight against the Ghost Clan's Flower Supreme. Chapter 45-38. High up in the sky, the Ghost Clan Supreme Flower and Wan Yin powerhouses faced off. The two did not move, but there was an invisible force surging in the void, causing heaven and earth to tighten as if it would be torn apart in the next moment. Everyone was shocked when they sensed the aura fluctuations from high up in the sky. Their auras clashed, and the two were evenly matched. It was as if their strength was on par. However, Nietian did not think so. Because the Myriad Returning Blade was from a Myriad Sound Demon Palace, he could definitely use the power of sound waves to strengthen his aura. Even with the help of sound waves, the Myriad Returning Blade was only evenly matched with Hua Qiqiang, which meant that his strength was below Hua Qiqiang's. The Myriad Sound Demon Palace lives up to its name. Looks like you're an expert who can control sound waves. Hua Qiqiang smiled faintly, showing no signs of nervousness. The Ghost Clan's evil lord is also amazing. The Myriad Returning Blade's figure was like a mountain, and an invisible force surged around him. He said in a deep voice, "Let me witness Senior Evil Lord's shocking strength." "You?" Hua Qiqiang smiled and shook his head. "You're not worthy." The myriad returning blades' expression darkened, and a cold, murderous intent surged in his eyes. He gave the other party face, but the other party did not take him seriously at all. How could he not be angry? Make your move. Hua Kikikiong did not waste any more time. He smiled faintly. I haven't fought in a long time. I wonder how much strength this old bag of bones still has. Pardon me. The myriad returning blade's expression was as calm as still water. He growled and immediately charged forward like a ferocious beast. Boom! In the void, an invisible and powerful force fluctuated, suppressing heaven and earth. At the same time, a strange aura surged in the air. Upon closer inspection, it was an extremely strange sound wave that could disturb one's mind and make one restless. Everyone sensed the strange aura from high up in the sky and held their breaths, focusing on their defense. Is that all? Hua Qiqiao was unfazed by the 10,000 returning sabers' powerful attack. A faint smile hung on his lips as he raised his palm. A bright red light floated in his palm and blossomed in an instant. It was a crimson flower that looked like a flame that enveloped his entire body. Hua Kikikiong's figure was as light as the wind. He took 2 to 3 steps in the void and directly disintegrated the myriad returning blades' attack. How is this possible? The 10,000 returning saber was horrified. His expression changed drastically as he retreated frantically. He knew that Hua Qiqiao was very powerful and was prepared for it, but he did not expect him to be this powerful. 10,000 returns blade. If your strength is only at this level, then it's really disappointing. Hua Qiqiao laughed. The scarlet flowers around him seemed to isolate space. Everywhere they passed, the world trembled. Evil Lord of the Ghost Race, you are indeed strong. I have underestimated you. The myriad returns blade steadied himself. Although his words were still fierce, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. When he retreated just now, the void door was open. If Hua Kikikiong had attacked at that time, even if he didn't die, he would have been severely injured. It was obvious that Hua Qiqiao did not take the battle seriously at all. Show me your true strength. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly. Scarlet light bloomed around his body like a ball of blazing flame, but there was no burning aura. Instead, it was filled with a fierce aura. As you wish. The myriad returns blades' eyes darkened. The aura around him suddenly surged, and a formless sound wave surged out. At the same time, there was also a powerful blade intent that merged with the sound wave, making it even more majestic, merging saber intent into the power of sound waves. Interesting. Hua Kikikio smiled, not taking it seriously at all. Senior Evil Lord, if this is all I have, how would I dare to fight you? The myriad returns blade's voice rang out in the void. Then, a majestic aura was released, covering the sky and covering the earth. Sound wall. Hua Qiqiao seemed to have sensed something, and his eyes darkened slightly. Then he smiled and said, "You're really not bad. You can actually create a sound wall of this level. You're not inferior to Gong Yuxing in the past." You met the Palace Lord? The myriad returns blade's expression changed when he heard Gong Yuxing's name. He was shocked. Didn't Gong Yuxing tell you that he challenged me 3 times in the past and lost every time? Hua Kikikio smiled faintly. Crimson flowers bloomed around him. They seemed to have thousands of layers. They bloomed layer by layer and expanded wildly in all directions. Everywhere they passed, they tore apart the sound wall of the myriad returns blade. How is this possible? The myriad returns blade was shocked. The blade intent and sound wave around him were rapidly disintegrating. His originally oppressive aura was rapidly disintegrating. He never thought that Hua Kikikiko would be so terrifying. He easily broke through a sound wall. This guy is so terrifying. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky. Their expressions changed, and they were shocked. The myriad returns blade's wall of aura was felt by everyone. However, in front of Hua Kikikiko, such an aura could not withstand it all. This was too terrifying. Lord Hua's supreme strength is truly terrifying. In the central observation pavilion, Nie Tian was shocked and could not help but exclaim. Originally, after the 10,000 Returns blade released the sound wall, Nie Tian would have to use some tricks to defeat Hua Qiqiao. Who would have thought that Hua Qiqiao was so powerful that he could easily break through the 10,000 Returns saber sound wall? Nie Tian had seen the sound wall used by Gong Yuzhigue before. The latter relied on the sound wall to defeat Jun Jianxing. However, the 10,000 Returns blade sound wall was far superior to Gong Yuzhigue's. The difference between their auras was like heaven and earth. Unfortunately, the 10,000 Return blade was up against the evil lord of the Ghost Clan. No matter how strong the sound wall was, it could not withstand a single blow. The strength of the ghost race is unfathomable. Beside him, Guling Wuji's expression changed drastically as he exclaimed in admiration. At the same time, he was also very happy. With a powerhouse like Hua Qiqiao around, it seemed like there was no need for Nie Tian to take the risk. At this moment, the 1,000 returning blade in the sky was forced to retreat. The sound wall around him collapsed rapidly. He retreated 1,000 meters before he managed to stabilize himself. On the other hand, Hua Qiqiao only took a few steps forward before the crimson flowers around him retracted and turned into crimson rays that surrounded his body. This blood trickled down the corner of the 1,000 Returns blade's mouth. He looked at his opponent in front of him and was so shocked that he could not speak. Seeing that you call me senior, and also giving face to Gong Yusheng, I'll spare your life. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly and waved his hand. You can leave now. Thank you for sparing my life, senior. The 1,000 Returns blade reacted and immediately bowed to thank him. If he still did not lower his head at this moment, he would be too ungrateful. Just now, if Hua Qiqiao wanted to kill him, he would have died thousands of times. With that, the 1,000 Returns blade's figure moved, and he left. The corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched. Then, he turned around and looked at the void not far away. You've been watching for so long. Are you still not going to show yourself? Chapter 45-39. What's going on? The crowd was stunned when they saw Hua Qiming's sudden action. They looked confused, unsure of what was going on. It was as if Hua Qiming had discovered someone hiding in the air. However, strangely enough, the air was dead silent. There was no aura and no silhouette. You wouldn't think that you could hide yourself perfectly from me, would you? Hua Qiming smiled calmly after a moment of silence. However, the air remained dead silent after he spoke. There was no reaction at all. The crowd in the observation pavilion frowned and began to discuss among themselves. There's nothing out of the ordinary in the air. The evil dominator must have sensed wrongly. I think he's just trying to fool everyone. If someone was hiding, they should have shown themselves by now. Looks like the evil dominator's soul is acting strangely. Could he have been affected by the magic zither just now? Everyone present was a powerful cultivator. There was no lack of powerful souls among them. Despite being hundreds of thousands of meters away, they could accurately sense any movement in the air. However, strangely enough, no one sensed anything out of the ordinary. They could not help but think that Hua Qiming had sensed wrongly. Hee. At that moment, Hua Qiming chuckled and said, "Since you're unwilling to show yourself, don't blame me for being rude." He flipped his hand as soon as he spoke. An invisible force surged out and turned into an invisible hand that enveloped the air. It pressed down as if it was going to crush the space. The crowd's expressions changed. They stared at the distorted space, wanting to see what was going on. As countless pairs of eyes watched, an eerie crack appeared in the space. A black-robed figure slowly walked out from it with a smile on his face. You're finally willing to show yourself? Hua Qiming glanced at the black-robed figure. The corner of his lips twitched as he wore a disdainful expression. The evil dominator of the Ghost Clan is indeed capable to be able to force me out from the sublayer of space. I'm impressed. The black-robed figure did not seem to mind. Instead, he spoke with a smile and a respectful manner. So you're from the prison clan. No wonder you could open up a sublayer of space. Hua Qiming replied with a smile as well. The crowd could not sense the black-robed figure's presence. It was not because he had concealed his aura well, but because he had opened up a sublayer of space and hid himself within it. If Hua Qiqiao had not sensed the power of the Myriad Return's saber sound wave and caused it to slow down for a moment, he would not have discovered the black-clothed man. A sublayer of space was an independent space that was opened up beneath the existing space. XDW8, for example, Nietian's Nine Transcendence was actually a subspace world that existed independently of the existing space. Lord Evil God is indeed a senior. To think that you would be able to see through my background with a single glance. Even though the black-clothed man was trying his best to hide it, one could still see the surprise on his face. He laughed dryly and said, "I am Yu Jiawei of the Prison Clan. Since your surname is Yu, you must be from the royal family of the Prison Clan." The corner of Hua Qiqiong's mouth twitched as he playfully said, "I'm curious. The Heaven Wind sect is only a small sect in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. Even if the Heaven Wind Tower selection caused quite a commotion, it shouldn't have alarmed your prison clan, right?" With Hua Qiming's intelligence, he had already guessed what was going on. None of the people who had come to challenge the Fengtian sect were simple. From the Ghost Cliffs Vice Sect Master Yin Tong, the mysterious assassin, St. Grace Church's Yang Mu, the Gia Sect's Xia Yunbei, the Myriad Returns Blade of Myriad Sounds Demon Palace, and the prison clan's Yu Jiawei. The Gia sect and the Fengtian sect had a feud for a long time. Using this opportunity to suppress the Fengtian sect was barely justifiable. However, the appearance of the others did not seem to be a good enough reason. In particular, the Myriad Sounds Demon Palace and the Prison Clan were first-rate factions even in the all-sacred world. Moreover, they had no relationship with the Fengtian sect, so why would they make things difficult for the Fengtian sect? It was obvious that there was a mastermind behind the Myriad Sounds Demon Palace and the Prison Clan. Factions that could make the Myriad Sounds Demon Palace and the Prison Clan submit could be counted on one hand in the entire all-sacred world. Yu Jiawei obviously understood the meaning behind Hua Qiming's words. He did not put on any pretense and replied directly, "If that's the case, then let's do it." Hua Qiming already understood most of the situation. Without wasting any more time, he smiled. "I also want to see just what's so special about the legendary Sky Capturer Clan." Sky Capturer Clan. Legend had it that the Prison Clan's history was even longer than the Gui clans. When the heavens were first created and the world was unstable, they used a special technique to imprison the world and stabilize the veins of heaven and earth. That was how they came to be known as the Sky Capturer Clan. However, something happened to the Prison Clan that caused their strength to decline. Coupled with the rise of other clans, the Prison Clan's reputation faded, and they gradually became an ordinary faction. Today, the Prison Clan had actually reached a point where they were forced to do things they didn't want to do. "Excuse me." Yu Jiawei's eyes darkened when he heard the words Sky Capturer Clan. He took a step forward and a vigorous aura surged out. Like an invisible wave, it spread in all directions and instantly enveloped the space within 100,000 meters. A barrier. Hua Qiming could not help but frown when he sensed the change in the aura. He murmured, "If I'm not wrong, this should be the Nine Wonders barrier of the Prison Clan. Lord Evil God, you're truly knowledgeable. I'm impressed," Yu Jiawei said in a deep voice. He took a step forward and a powerful pressure surged out from the space, directly enveloping Hua Qiming. Hua Qiming was calm and composed. He took a step forward and a fire lotus bloomed under his feet. Suddenly, it shone brightly and blocked the pressure from the space. In the central pavilion, Niet Tian looked at the scene in the sky and frowned. He did not know much about the Prison Clan, but he had fought with a young genius from the Prison Clan, Yu Qianqi, during the Hidden Dragon battle. It was the first battle of the Hidden Dragon Top 8. Niet Tian had also fallen into Yu Qianqi's Nine Wonders barrier and was almost killed by the latter. The Nine Wonders barrier was very special. It was a barrier that merged with space-time and could continuously absorb energy from space for the creator of the barrier. Moreover, ordinary energy could not threaten the barrier at all. Only by finding the eye of the barrier could the barrier be broken. Yu Jiuwei's Nine Wonders barrier was similar to Yu Tianqi's Nine Wonders barrier, but its aura was very different. The pressure it exerted on space-time was far greater than Yu Tianqi's. If Hua Qiming wanted to win this battle, he would first need to break the barrier. Lord Evil God, you're really powerful. You can still move so easily in the Nine Wonders barrier. Yu Jiuwei could not help but exclaim as Hua Qiming easily broke the pressure. Prison Clan boy, I've already fallen into the barrier. Why are you so flattering? Hua Qiming's words were relaxed, but he was complaining in his heart. He had to admit that he had underestimated Yu Jiuwei. A moment of carelessness had caused him to be trapped in the barrier. Looks like I'll have to show my true abilities in this battle. Hua Qiming took a few steps back. With a thought, a third eye appeared on his forehead. Chapter 4540. High up in the sky. Even though Hua Qiqiong was trapped inside the Nine Wonders formation, he was still calm and composed. What was even more bizarre was that a third eye had appeared on his forehead. Another pupil. Yu Jiuwei's expression changed when he saw the third eye on Hua Qiqiong's forehead. He exclaimed in surprise, but quickly calmed down and chuckled. I didn't expect Lord Evil Exalted to possess an other pupil. However, you're underestimating me too much if you think you can break through my Nine Wonders formation with just one other pupil. Is that so? Hua Qiqiong smiled. The other pupil on his forehead suddenly opened and released a seven-colored light that streaked across the surrounding void like a rainbow. Wherever the seven-colored light swept past, space-time changed. It took on a strange form that resembled flowing water. How is this possible? When Yu Jiuwei saw this scene, he was quite taken aback and had a look of horror. He never expected Hua Qiqiong's other pupil to be able to cause space-time to merge. The so-called merging was where space-time and the formation merged. The most terrifying thing about the Nine Wonders formation was that it merged with space-time. Thus, it was nearly impossible to break through the formation by force. It was impossible to find the eye of the Nine Wonders formation in a short period of time unless one was a top-notch formation master. However, Hua Qiqiong's other pupil was extremely strange. It could cause space-time to merge, allowing him to easily find the eye of the formation. Lord Evil Exalted, since you have such a trick up your sleeve, I can only give it my all. Yu Jiuwei's gaze darkened as he growled. His eyes were like those of a ferocious wolf. As soon as he finished speaking, several sharp blades appeared in the void. They were extremely fast and piercing as they attacked Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiong's expression did not change. He used a strange footwork technique and dodged the sharp blades in the blink of an eye. Yu Jiuwei was stunned by the scene before him. His expression changed, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. He never expected Hua Qiqiong to dodge his attack with just his footwork technique inside the Nine Wonders formation. Hua Qiqiong moved like a ghost, as if his strength was not affected by the formation at all. Prison Clan Kid, if the Nine Wonders formation is only this strong, then this battle should be over. Hua Qiqiao smiled. His third eye blossomed with a brilliant light. The light was like a ripple that spread throughout the barrier. He was trying to sense the existence of the formation eye. Nine Wonders, Heavenly Thunder, Eradication. Yu Jiuwei's expression darkened. He let out a low roar and waved his hand in the air. Suddenly, a powerful force appeared and a bolt of lightning appeared. It condensed into a lightning beast in the air. It roared and charged straight at Hua Qiqiong. Rumor has it that the Nine Wonders formation can control the nine elements. It seems like it's true. Hua Qiqiao was not afraid at all when he felt the enormous pressure coming at him. He smiled faintly, and the scarlet flower around his body released a red light that shot out. Bang! In the next instant, the red light swept through the void, and with a muffled sound, the Thunder Beast was directly destroyed. At the same time, Yu Jiuwei was hit by the violent force and could not help but retreat several thousand meters before he managed to stabilize himself. He was in an extremely sorry state. The Nine Wonders formation contains the power of the nine elements. It allows the formation designer to continuously absorb the nine elements' holy power for his own use. Hua Qiqiao was as calm as ever. He smiled faintly and said, "Unfortunately, your Nine Wonders formation has not been cultivated to its peak, so you cannot completely control the power in the Nine Wonders formation. You also cannot perfectly hide the formation eye." "You found the spirit formation eye?" Yu Jiwei forced himself to calm down and asked in surprise. "It's right here." Hua Qiqiao smiled. The scarlet flame around him spread out like a scroll, and it reflected a fist-sized nine elements whirlpool. It was the formation eye of the Nine Wonders formation. "Lord Evil Dominator, I've lost." Yu Jiwei's eyes trembled, and he did not hesitate to admit defeat. "Ha! You're very tactful." Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly and waved his hand. "Forget it. Since you've admitted defeat, this battle ends here." How could he not know that the Nine Wonders formation and the formation designer had a close relationship and shared power? Once it was broken, the formation designer would definitely be heavily injured. Yu Jiwei did not want to be injured, so he admitted defeat. "Thank you, Lord Evil Dominator." Yu Jiwei calmed himself down, put away the Nine Wonders formation, and bowed to express his gratitude. The corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything. Yu Jiwei did not stay any longer, and he immediately left. The crowd on the plaza and the viewing pavilion were dumbfounded, and it took them a long time to react. Who would have thought that even the experts from the prison clan would be defeated by this Lord Evil Dominator? This Evil Dominator is too powerful. The Fontian sect was already in danger of being annihilated, but there was still such an expert helping them at such a crucial moment. Looks like the Fontian sect's luck hasn't run out yet. In my opinion, this Lord Evil Dominator's strength is probably at the peak of all heavens. As the crowd spoke, they looked at Hua Qiqiao with unconcealable respect. Hua Qiqiao had easily defeated 3 people, and the strength he had displayed was indeed too shocking. Most importantly, Hua Qiqiao's true strength had yet to be revealed, and it was still unfathomable. In the viewing pavilion, Guling Wuji's gloomy expression gradually relaxed. He had to admit that he had underestimated Hua Qiqiao. Hua Qiqiao's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. However, Nyat Tan, who was standing at the side, did not look any better. In fact, he seemed even more worried. Although Hua Qiqiao had defeated Xia Yunbei, the Million Returning Saber, and Yu Jiwei, Netian knew that the 3 of them could not be considered peak experts, so it was normal for Hua Qiqiao to defeat them. After all, Hua Qiqiao was an existence that was on par with the selfless sword demon. However, the threat that the Fontian sect faced was far more than what they saw. The Million Returning Saber, Yu Jiwei, and the others were at most small fries, and the real threat and killing intent were still at the back. If the experts from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Palace appeared, would Hua Qiqiao still be able to hold on? However, the good news was that after Hua Qiqiao had won 3 consecutive battles, the other party only had 3 people left to fight. Nietian guessed that the next person to appear would be the true experts, and they would be the ones who could truly threaten the entire Fontian sect. The small fries are almost finished, so why is the big fish hiding behind us not going to show itself? If Nietian could think of it, Hua Qiqiao could naturally think of it as well. He did not have any scruples and spoke loudly. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the space in the distance shook, following which a strange scene appeared. Time and space were forcefully torn apart, and a murderous figure slowly walked out of the crack. The murderous aura around him filled the sky, and he was like a god of death descending. Mu Zhaoquan. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he saw the murderous figure, and he shouted out the other party's name. That's right, the person who had appeared was none other than one of the 3 Abyss Swords. Evil Sword Mu Zhaoquan. Chapter 45-41. Evil Sword Mu Zhaoquan. Nietian was very familiar with this person because he had almost died at his hands. Not long ago, Mu Zhaoquan had led the assassins from the Abyss to invade. At that time, Nietian and Bing Xie had fallen into Mu Zhaoquan's evil flow, Forbidden World. Bing Xie had used the Ghost Taboo Blade to fight Mu Zhaoquan and had been seriously injured, while Nie Tian had only taken one attack from Mu Xiaoquan and had also been seriously injured. Fortunately, Devil's Knight had been hiding in the evil flow forbidden world at that time and had cooperated with Nie Tian to break it. Unexpectedly, Mu Xiaoquan had appeared in front of everyone at this time. However, Nie Tian felt that Mu Xiaoquan's strength was not too strong. Even though the evil flow forbidden world had almost taken his life, it was not strong enough for him to remember it for the rest of his life. With Mu Xiaoquan's status, he should have been able to kill Nie Tian and Bingxi at will, but he had failed. It was clear that his strength was not worthy of his reputation. Judging from Mu Xiaoquan's previous performance, he was not even as good as Xia Yunbei and the 10,000 Return Blade. However, at this time, Nie Tian looked at Mu Xiaoquan with some confusion. He felt that the latter's sword intent aura had changed. It was clearly much stronger than before, and the killing intent was also heavier. It gave off a more threatening feeling. Could it be that the person I saw that day was not Mu Xiaoquan? Nie Tian's face was filled with doubt and confusion. The Mu Xiaoquan in front of him was very different from the Mu Xiaoquan from before. The sword intent aura was somewhat similar, but it had more changes and was also stronger. What we saw that day should only be one of his sword intent clones. Just as Nie Tian was feeling confused, Fat Cat's voice rang out. Its tone was low and filled with worry. Sword intent clones? Nie Tian was stunned and became even more confused. He asked, if it was a sword intent clone, why did the sword intent aura change? This is why this person is so strong. I guess that he has more than one sword intent. Fat Cat replied in a low voice. It seemed to be very careful. Nie Tian's expression immediately changed, and he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Ordinary swordsmen only had one type of sword intent. Very few genius swordsmen had two or more types of sword intents. For example, Nie Tian first cultivated the proud sword essence, and later cultivated the star sword essence. Later, he obtained the thunderbolt sword essence, the soul-devouring sword essence, and the three evils sword essence by chance. However, after that, Nie Tian fused several types of sword intents together to form the God-Fiend sword intent of today. But now, Nie Tian still had the ability to separate the soul-devouring sword intent, or the three evils sword intent, from the Fiend God sword intent. Since Nie Tian could have many sword intents, the others could too. Mu Xiaoquan was one of the three Abyss swords and the strongest swordsman of the Abyss Ghoul race. It was normal for him to possess multiple sword intents. Therefore, it was extremely likely that the Mu Xiaoquan that Nie Tian saw last time was a sword intent clone of a certain type of sword intent condensed by his main body. You're from the Abyss Ghoul race. At this moment, Hua Qiqiong, who was high up in the sky, stared at Mu Xiaoquan. His expression involuntarily changed to one of great surprise. As a member of the Ghoul race, how could Hua Qiqiong not see that Mu Xiaoquan was from the Abyss Ghoul race? However, Hua Qiqiong had never imagined that he would encounter a martial practitioner from the Abyss Ghoul race who had disappeared a long time ago. One of the four great evil lords, Lord Hua Supreme, one of the strongest of the Ghoul race in the past. Now that I've seen you today, you truly live up to your reputation. Mu Xiaoquan slowly walked over. His footwork seemed slow, but his speed was actually very fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Hua Qiqiong. It was obvious that Mu Xiaoquan was very familiar with Hua Qiqiong's name. He even had some unconcealable reverence towards him. This was not strange. After all, Hua Qiqiong was one of the four great evil lords. His status in the Ghoul race was extremely high. To Mu Xiaoquan, he was a famous senior. However, if one looked at their appearances, they would definitely think that the aged Mu Xiaoquan was a senior, while the handsome Hua Qiqiong looked more like a junior. However, the lifespan of a martial practitioner, especially after reaching the Sage Realm, could vary greatly. The length of one's lifespan was not only related to a martial practitioner's realm, but also closely related to a martial practitioner's martial physique, bloodline, and the martial techniques and cultivation methods they cultivated. Thus, some martial practitioners who reached the Sage Realm would look old even though they were only a few 100,000 years old. On the other hand, some people could live for millions of years and still maintain their youthful appearance. The Abyss Ghoul has been in seclusion for a long time. I didn't expect to see them here. Hua Kikikyong's eyes were deep, and his tone was a little helpless. It was as if he was saying why the Abyss Ghoul race had to wade into these muddy waters. The time for the Abyss Ghoul race to enter the world has come. Shouldn't Senior Hua Supreme be happy for us? Mu Xiaoquan smiled, but there was an extremely chilling intent hidden in his eyes. He seemed to be telling Hua Kikikyong that the Abyss Ghoul race's appearance was already set in stone. No one could stop them, or they would die. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything else. Hua Kikikyong could, of course, hear the hidden meaning in Mu Xiaoquan's words. He frowned and said, I'm just very curious. Who is the person behind you? Who has the means to stir up the Abyss Ghoul race? Senior Hua Supreme, you're a smart person. You already know the answer, so why bother asking me? Mu Xiaoquan did not answer directly. Instead, he smiled faintly. Hua Kikikyong frowned. Mu Xiaoquan's answer confirmed his guess. Make your move. Hua Kikikyong did not say anything else. He smiled and said, I also want to see just how strong the Abyss Ghoul race's swordsmen are. You and I both serve different masters, so I'll have to offend you. Mu Xiaoquan's eyes darkened. A strange sword shaped like a long snake appeared in his hand. It was the sword of his Yuan clan, Eight-Branched Demonic Flow. The moment Eight-Branched Demonic Flow was unsheathed, a murderous aura permeated the air. The surrounding space seemed to become tense, making everyone feel an unusual pressure. Your sword essence is indeed extraordinary. Hua Kikikyong's expression changed when he felt the sword essence ripple from the void. He could not conceal the shock in his heart. It had to be said that the strength of Mu Xiaoquan's sword essence was beyond his expectations. Hua Kikikyong originally thought that even though Mu Xiaoquan was a sword principle expert of the Abyss Ghoul race, his true strength would not be too strong. At the very least, he would be much weaker than Yin Fengwua, who is also from the Abyss clan. However, the aura of Mu Xiaoquan's sword essence was actually similar to Yin Fengwua's. Senior, you flatter me. Mu Xiaoquan could see Hua Kikikyong's surprise and said, Senior Hua Supreme and Senior Selfless Sword Demon are best friends. I wonder how my sword essence compares to Senior Selfless Sword Demon's. Before Yin Feng achieved one with the sword, your sword essence could still fight against him. But now that he has achieved one with the sword, you are far inferior to him. Hua Kikikyong smiled faintly and said loudly. Although Mu Xiaoquan was strong, his sword essence had yet to reach one with the sword. He could only fight against Yin Fengwua before he achieved one with the sword. However, with Mu Xiaoquan's age and his current sword essence, there was a high chance that he could achieve one with the sword. Then I wonder if my sword essence is enough to kill Senior Hua Supreme? Mu Xiaoquan frowned and asked cold, seemingly disapproving of Hua Kikikyong's words. Chapter 45-42. High up in the sky, Mu Xiaoquan stared at Hua Qiqiao. His cold killing intent was uncontrollable. Not enough. Hua Qiqiao's expression did not change in the face of Mu Xiaoquan's arrogance. He only smiled. Is that so? The corner of Mu Xiaoquan's lips curled up into a cold smile. The eight-branched demonic chi in his hand was like a long snake. The icy sword intent was endless and was constantly being released, filling the entire area with an extremely cold, murderous aura. Hua Qiqiao could feel the bone-chilling coldness in the void. He frowned and said, with a murderous intent in this sword intent, you are no weaker than Yin Feng back then. Is that all? Mu Xiaoquan's temperament was very high. He sneered and the eight-branched evil flow swept across the sky. A sword ray suddenly shot out and went straight for Hua Qiqiao. Hua Qiqiao moved his body and easily dodged the sword ray. It was obvious that the sword ray was not meant to kill Hua Qiqiao, but to intimidate him. Mu Xiaoquan was extremely arrogant. He was naturally unhappy that Hua Qiqiao kept comparing him to Yin Feng. He wanted to let Hua Qiqiao know that he was not weaker than the current Yin Feng. Hua Qiqiao was very smart. How could he not know what Mu Zhaoquan was thinking? He smiled and said, "Your sword intent is strong, but is not a threat to me. The current you is still not on par with Yinfeng." Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were extremely cold. There was a strange change in his pupils. They became much sharper, like a poisonous snake. As his pupils changed, the aura of the sword intent in the air also changed. The sword intent flowed like a cold wind. It had the coldness of a frost blade and the sharpness of a wind blade. It was extremely terrifying. Although Hua Qiqiao's cultivation was at the peak, he could still feel the terrifying sword intent seeping into his skin and bones. It had to be said that Mu Zhaoquan's sword intent was really terrifying. Even an ordinary sky martial divine ancestor would not be able to withstand the pressure of his sword intent. So you are from an 8-branched evil flow. No wonder the murderous intent in your sword intent is so strong. Hua Qiqiao frowned and said in a deep voice, "The Orochi clan was one of the top clans in the Abyss bloodline. Moreover, the Orochi clan was very different from the other ghost clans. Not only did their bloodline contain the unique ghost chi of the ghost clans, the Abyss ghost clan's unique abyssal power, and an even more ancient fierce beast chi. According to legend, the ancestor of the Yamada no Orochi was not a human, but a giant Yamada no Orochi with 8 heads. In the end, it obtained a strand of sky origin chi from ancient times and gained a human body, which then gave birth to the Yamada no Orochi. The Orochi clan had a very special and important position in the Abyss and even in the entire Ghost clan. It was a clan that made people pale at the mention of it. Hua Qiqiao did not realize it just now. He only felt that Mu Zhaoquan's sword chi was extremely murderous and murderous. Now that he sensed the bloodline aura in his sword will, he suddenly realized that Mu Zhaoquan was from the Orochi tribe. I didn't expect the Flower Supreme to be able to see through my identity. Should I feel honored? Mu Zhaoquan's eyes narrowed like 2 slits, looking extremely evil and murderous. Perhaps the one who should feel honored is my true self, to be able to fight with the Orochi lord of the Orochi tribe. Hua Qiqiao's eyes darkened slightly. He raised his hand in the void, and a green longsword appeared in his hand. The sharp aura directly tore through the surrounding sword chi pressure. The crowd could not help but be surprised to see a sword in Hua Qiqiao's hand. No one expected Hua Qiqiao to be a swordsman. In the battle just now, Hua Qiqiao did not use his sword at all. It seemed that he had not revealed his true strength. Now that Hua Qiqiao decided to use his sword against Mu Zhaoquan, it was enough to show Mu Zhaoquan's strength. The one I saw last time was indeed just a sword clone of his. Nie Tian looked at Mu Zhaoquan's figure in the sky, his eyes trembling slightly as he thought to himself. The strength and aura that Mu Zhaoquan displayed now were completely incomparable to the last time. It was obvious that the one who appeared now was Mu Zhaoquan's true self. Although Nie Tian had already guessed it, the strength that Mu Zhaoquan displayed still shocked him. Among all the swordsmen he had seen before, very few could truly suppress Mu Zhaoquan, apart from the Yang God Sword Emperor and Yinfeng Wuo. The 3 swords of the Abyss were indeed very powerful. According to Bingji, she and Mu Zhaoquan were not the strongest among the 3 swords of the Abyss. The other person who had yet to appear was the strongest, and he was known as the number 1 swordsman of the Abyss. Based on Mu Zhaoquan and Bingji's strength, the number 1 swordsman's sword principle cultivation was definitely not far from a Yang God and Yinfeng Wuo. Moreover, this number 1 swordsman was not the strongest person of the Abyss. In the Eternal Abyss, there were not only experts like the Yuan Emperor, but also many hidden experts of the Li clan. Judging from this, the overall strength of the Abyss was probably not inferior to the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. If the other 3 bloodlines of the Ghost race were included, the entire Ghost race's strength was probably enough to contend with the Human Emperor's palace. Previously, Nie Tian thought that the Dragon race and the Angel race were already the most powerful races and factions in the all-heaven sacred world. He did not expect the Ghost race to be even more powerful than these 2 races. However, These major races had internal strife and endless infighting, so their overall strength was greatly weakened. Nietian even felt that the heavenly lost sacred pavilion or the human emperor's palace were very likely behind Mu Zhaokuan and the Li clan. So Lord Hua Supreme is also a swordsman. I actually failed to see that. How foolish of me. High up in the sky, Mu Zhaokuan's gaze was poisonous as he spoke with a deep murderous intent. However, Hua Qiqiong smiled and said, I haven't used the sword for a long time. I wonder if I'm rusty. Then come. Mu Zhaokuan's eyes darkened. With a low roar, he moved immediately and stabbed out with his sword. The sword force was so strong that it was like 10,000 arrows shooting out at the same time. Within the surging force, the sharpness was evident. Hua Qiqiong's eyes darkened, and the aura around him changed. The green sword in his hand swept through the air, and sword waves surged into the sky. They turned into 9 layers of waves in the air, weakening Mu Zhaokuan's sword force layer by layer. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, muffled explosions sounded continuously. As the sword forces collided, Hua Qiqiong actually took a few steps back, but Mu Zhaokuan was as steady as a mountain and did not move an inch. Judging from the sword force alone, Hua Qiqiong was actually inferior to Mu Zhaokuan. Lord Hua Supreme, be careful. Mu Zhaokuan immediately grasped the opportunity after gaining the upper hand. With a low roar, his body shook in the air, and his sword will burst forth. With a slash of his sword, the void trembled as if it was about to be torn apart. Boom! In the next instant, a huge sword shadow appeared with the force of a landslide, pressing down on Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiong felt the majestic pressure coming from above his head, making it hard for him to breathe. He had to admit that he had underestimated Mu Zhaokuan. The Orochi clan's Lord of Orochi had inherited the power of Orochi and was indeed unparalleled. However, Hua Qiqiong did not panic. The green longsword in his hand trembled, and a strange scene occurred. The green longsword actually changed color and became a sword of fire that was as red as flames. Chapter 45-43. Fire burning sky. High up in the sky, Hua Qiqiong bellowed and slashed the fire sword in the void. Boundless sword essence of fire surged out, and waves of fire filled the sky, burning the heavens and the earth. Bang! Immediately after, a thunderous explosion rang out. 2 extremely powerful forces clashed against each other, causing the entire space to tremble. Waves of energy rolled out in all directions, clashing against each other. Hua Qiqiong was pushed back dozens of meters before he steadied himself. He did not look the least bit flustered. On the other hand, Mu Zhaokuan was still as steady as an old tree and did not move an inch. There was no doubt that Mu Zhaokuan still had the upper hand in this second clash. However, Hua Qiqiong was not injured and was only pushed back slightly. Mu Zhaokuan frowned when he saw that he had only managed to push Hua Qiqiong back. He stared at the fire sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand. The sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand was green just now. How did it turn into a fire sword in the blink of an eye? This was too strange. Moreover, Mu Zhaokuan sensed that after the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand turned into a fire sword, the aura of his sword essence also changed completely. The burning aura of fire was extremely strong, like the sun. What's going on? The surrounding people were also shocked by this scene, and they all looked puzzled. Normally, a swordsman's sword would be compatible with his sword essence. After a long period of use, the sword would also integrate with the swordsman's sword essence. In general, the sword was connected with the swordsman, and the aura of the sword essence was very stable. How could the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand change its aura? And the sword itself was also changing. This was very puzzling. In the central pavilion, Nie Tian was also puzzled. He was a swordsman and understood swords very well, but he had never seen a sword like the one in Hua Qiqiong's hand. Could it be that Lord Hua Supreme's sword is made from the legendary 5 Armageddon steel? Guling Wuji could see something and could not help but exclaim, 5 Armageddon steel? Nie Tian was stunned. He had never heard of this kind of steel. Guling Wuji furrowed his brows and explained in a deep voice. Legend has it that the Doomsday Metal is a special metal that possesses the 5 attributes of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Therefore, weapons made from the Doomsday Metal can possess the 5 attributes at the same time. Furthermore, they can freely switch between the 5 attributes. Nie Tian nodded. It seemed that the sword in Hua Qiqiao's hand could change its attribute at will. This sword isn't made from the Doomsday 5 June metal. It should be his elemental spirit sword. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out and said solemnly, Yuan Ling's sword? Nie Tian frowned and was surprised again. If the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand was the sword of his primordial spirit, didn't that mean that his primordial spirit was of the 5 elements? An essence spirit of the 5 elements was something that was extremely rare. In fact, Nie Tian had also seen martial artists with the 5 elements. Even among his disciples, there was such a martial artist. However, he did not come across any more cultivators of the 5 elements after coming to the Saint's world. Yes. Fat Cat nodded and paused before saying carefully, if I'm not mistaken, this person should have the body of the 5 virtues. The body of the 5 virtues. Nie Tian's gaze changed slightly, and he almost cried out in surprise. The body of the 5 virtues was an extremely rare, innate martial body. Martial artists with such a martial body would merge the 5 elements of the earth into their body. They originated from the 5 elements, but they were also above the 5 elements. Legend had it that those who possessed the body of the 5 virtues could cultivate the true body of the 5 virtues that penetrated the heavens and earth. In the end, they would possess an immortal body and an indestructible soul. In the past, when he was chatting with Fat Cat had told Nie Tian about some extremely powerful innate martial bodies. The body of the 5 virtues was an innate martial body that was comparable to the body of an innate saint. Nie Tian never thought that the ordinary-looking Hua Qiqiao would possess the legendary body of the 5 virtues. From the looks of it, the strength that Hua Qiqiao had displayed was far from his limits. I didn't expect Lord Hua Qiqiao to have such skills. It's really an eye-opener for me. Mu Zhaoquan calmed down and spoke in a deep voice. His eyes never left the sword in Hua Qiqiao's hand. Against the Lord of Orochi who possesses the 8-branched force, I naturally have to show some of my true abilities. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly and shook the long sword in his hand. It changed color again and was now a dark black. At the same time, the aura of the dark black sword changed completely. A vast and boundless majestic force surged out, and the void seemed to be surging with 1,000 layers of raging waves. Water element. Mu Zhaoquan could not help but exclaim in surprise when he sensed the change in the sword aura in the void. In the beginning, Hua Qiqiao's sword seemed to be of the wood element, then the fire element, and now it was of the water element. Could it be that his sword possessed the 5 elements? X8-inch rumor has it that the Lord of Orochi can cultivate the power of 8 elements at the same time. Hua Qiqiao looked at Mu Zhaoquan and smiled faintly. Since you're the Lord of Orochi and have inherited the 8-branch force, you should be a swordsman with multiple elements, right? The Supremes of the Orochi were known as the Lords of Orochi. They inherited the 8-branch force that the Orochi had guarded for generations. I didn't expect Lord Hua Qiqiao to be so familiar with the Orochi. Mu Zhaoquan laughed, but his eyes were clearly surging with an extremely cold, murderous intent. The Orochi had been in seclusion with the Abyss for a long time. The world had almost forgotten about this once glorious and powerful aristocratic family. However, Hua Qiqiao knew the Orochi very well. This made Mu Zhaoquan want to kill him. The secrets of the Orochi would always belong to them. How could they allow outsiders to pry into their secrets? Hua Qiqiao, could naturally sense Mu Zhaoquan's murderous intent, but he was not bothered. He smiled faintly. When I was young, I met the previous Lord of Orochi a few times and was fortunate enough to fight him. That's why I know a little about the 8-branch force. Impossible. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes darkened when he heard Hua Qiqiao's words. He said coldly, Lord Hua Chi might be able to scare others, but how can you scare me? Hua Chi smiled again and said, the Lord of Orochi must inherit the eight-branched force. However, the eight-branch force is too strong, so for a long time, the position of the Lord of Orochi was empty. The previous Lord of Orochi should be a genius of the Orochi from 4 million years ago, right? Since you know, why bother lying to me? Mu Xiaoquan's eyes flickered, and he replied coldly. The previous Lord of Orochi was indeed someone from 4 million years ago. Although Hua Qiqiao was an expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm, his lifespan could not reach 4 million years. In theory, the lifespan of an expert of the sky martial arts realm should be 6 million years. However, in reality, the lifespan of most sky martial arts realm saint ancestors was around 1 or 2 million years. This was because almost every sky martial arts realm saint ancestor had experienced countless battles. Their martial bodies were more or less injured, so it was difficult for them to reach the theoretical limit of their lifespan. Moreover, even if they were sky martial arts realm saint ancestors, their chi and blood would gradually weaken as they grew older. However, not only did Hua Qiqiao look young, but his vitality and chi of vitality had not weakened at all. It was obvious that he was still in his prime. With his age, how could he have met the previous Lord of Orochi? Come. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 45-44. As the current Orochi venerate, Mu Xiaoquan was very familiar with the history of the Orochi tribe. Naturally, he would not believe Hua Qiqiong's words. Based on his observation, although Hua Qiqiong was a senior of the ghost tribe, he should be around 2 million years old. How could a 2 million-year-old person have any connection with a person from 4 million years ago? Come on, let me experience the true power of the Orochi tribe again. Hua Qiqiong smiled, but did not explain much. Instead, he placed his sword behind his back and said coldly, as you wish. Mu Xiaoquan's eyes were dark and cold. Then, he took a step forward and the aura around him changed. It was a completely different and majestic aura. Like a rolling wave, it spread out and instantly covered a radius of more than 100,000 meters. Whoosh! In an instant, an invisible aura spread out like a shield, covering everything within a radius of more than 100,000 meters. What a terrifying aura! Everyone's expression changed when they felt the unparalleled, majestic aura. They could not hide the shock in their hearts. Compared to before, Mu Xiaoquan's aura had increased by several times. It seemed that Mu Xiaoquan had not used his full strength before. This was his true strength. Evil flow, forbidden realm. Nie Tion's eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly when he sensed the aura circulating in the air. He couldn't help but exclaim. He was very sure that Mu Xiaoquan had directly activated his bloodline boundary, the evil flow, forbidden realm. Previously, Nie Tian, Devil's Knight, and Bing Xie were also trapped in the evil flow, forbidden realm. Bing Xie was seriously injured, and Nie Tian almost died. However, at that time, they were only facing Mu Xiaoquan's sword intent clone. This time, it was the power of Mu Xiaoquan's main body. Therefore, the aura of the evil flow, forbidden realm was completely different from before. So this is the real evil flow sword, Mu Xiaoquan. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed down. However, his eyes were trembling, and he was clearly worried about Hua Qiqiong. Originally, he was very confident in Hua Qiqiong. After all, the latter had the legendary body of 5 virtues. However, facing Mu Xiaoquan's evil flow, forbidden realm, Hua Qiqiong would not be relaxed. I didn't expect this person to be so capable. I'm afraid Lord Supreme Flower is in trouble. Guling Wuji's eyes were trembling as he said in a deep voice. As a world spiritist, he was able to sense how terrifying Mu Xiaoquan's evil flow, forbidden formation was. In fact, he had never seen such a terrifying bloodline spirit formation before. He really didn't expect Mu Xiaoquan to be so terrifying. The power of Orochi is indeed powerful. Hua Qiqiong sensed an oppressive force from the void that was actually suppressing the eruption of his sword intent. However, he only frowned and said, "However, if I'm not mistaken, what you've unleashed is still not the complete power of the eight-branched serpent. It's enough to kill you." Mu Xiaoquan shouted in a low voice. Killing intent erupted from all over his body, and Orochi furiously slashed out in the void. Amidst the billowing sword intent, a majestic sword shadow appeared, like an endless mountain, pressing down on Hua Qiqiao. Hua Qiqiao immediately felt an endless pressure coming from above his head. The long sword in his hand trembled in the air again and turned golden. He swung it in the air, and immediately the surging sword will bloomed like the scorching sun, forming several golden halos in the void, surging like ripples. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the majestic sword shadow fell, but it was blocked by layers of halos and sword intent, and its momentum gradually weakened. When it finally fell, it could not threaten Hua Qiqiong at all, and only forced him to retreat dozens of meters. Mu Xiaoquan's attack was blocked by Hua Qiqiong in such a way. He couldn't help but frown, and the killing intent around him intensified. Even his eyes were bloodshot. "Revered Orochi, don't tell me you think you can defeat me with just this kind of power?" Hua Qiqiong lightly stepped on the ground, and his body was as light as the wind, leaving behind several afterimages in the air. "How is this possible? You're completely unaffected by the evil flow, forbidden boundary." Mu Xiaoquan sensed that Hua Qiqiong's aura was different, and his face darkened as he shouted cold. He couldn't believe that Hua Qiqiong was completely unaffected by his evil flow, forbidden boundary. His speed, strength, and even his sword intent were not weakened at all. But how is this possible? The evil flow, forbidden boundary was his bloodline boundary, and it was infused with the eight-branch force, so its power was extremely terrifying. If an ordinary sky martial ancestor was trapped in the evil flow, forbidden boundary, they would have difficulty breathing, let alone fighting. But Hua Qiqiong was completely unaffected, and that was too strange. What kind of power did Hua Qiqiong have to be able to resist the power of the evil flow, forbidden boundary? Although the eight-branch force is strong, it's not invincible. Hua Qiqiong smiled and said, "If you could release the complete eight-branch force, I would naturally be afraid. But it's a pity that you can't control the complete eight-branch force with your current strength." "Is that so?" Mu Xiaoquan was thoroughly enraged. With a roar, his body trembled, and a natural aura was released. Then, a terrifying power condensed around his body. It turned out to be a gigantic black serpent that was 10,000 meters long. Boom! The moment the black serpent appeared, a terrifying aura surged out and filled the air, as if it wanted to split the sky and earth. Hua Qiqiao frowned, his expression darkening as he exclaimed in surprise, "Eight-limbed real form." He had never imagined that Mu Xiaoquan could condense the eight-branch true form without fully controlling the power of eight-branch true form. It was said that the ancestor of the Yamada no serpent was in Yamada no serpent. The Orochi real body that Mu Xiaoquan condensed was the shadow of this Orochi. When the crowd saw Mu Xiaoquan condensing the eight limitless true body, their expressions changed. How can this person be so strong? What kind of power did he release? I'm afraid that even experts like the five great deans might not be able to achieve such terrifying strength. Just who is this guy? His cultivation was at the peak of the all heavens. The crowd was shocked and looked at the huge snake in the sky in disbelief. At this moment, even Guling Wuji was stunned. He gasped and was speechless. Nie Tian was barely able to remain calm, but the worry in his eyes was becoming more and more obvious. Of course, he knew that the reason why Hua Qiqiao was not affected by the evil flow forbidden realm was because of his body of five virtues. However, against the eight-branch true form, how long could Hua Qiqiao's body of five virtues last? Lord Hua Supreme, is this power enough to kill you? Mu Xiaoquan's voice exploded in the sky in the evil flow forbidden realm. The aura of the eight-branch true form was enough to shake the heavens. Not enough. The corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched as he uttered those three words.